Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto misreads a scroll, it sends him back in time, part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. Naruto stared at the future cause of most of his village's pain. Sure, he did help him become stronger by taking control of the Kyuubi, and in a sort of messed up way also let him make friends he never would have thought possible. But that didn't make it any better. It surprised him actually, the way the dark-haired man hunched over himself as if trying to fold in half. Or maybe he was trying to do that stupid jutsu thing he did when he was too lazy to fight, or some shit like that. All he knew was that it was annoying as fuck. After a few more moments of drawn-out angst, the weirdo let out a long and disturbing sigh that shook his whole body. Naruto's muscles tensed in preparation. He could feel the power radiating off the sulking young man, almost like a wave of cool energy. He shifted quietly within the brush and looked closely at the man, trying to see if he had sensed Naruto's presence. Come on, just keep crying and don't look this way, he thought. After a few seconds, the energy was shut completely off. He mentally sighed and rolled his eyes. What are you trying to do? Attract attention so someone can come and soothe your bruised ego? How typical of the mystery men women were so fond of, trying to be cool even though he was miserable. Terrible bunch they were, attention whores and psychomaniacs. Well, maybe Sasuke was alright, but that didn't make him any less annoying. But this guy, this freak of nature, had a way of getting on his nerves more than a friend/rival could ever do. Maybe it had something to do with that aggravating disguise he was so fond of using when he met him. He snorted. Who knew? Said young man lifted his head sharply, looking right at Naruto. Shit! The kimono-clad woman said. Alright, play it cool, don't let some fucking psycho bitch get to you, he whispered to himself, or herself in this case. See, what was really odd about this certain situation was that Naruto, 22-year-old shinobi of the mighty village hidden in the leaves, was in a kimono that hindered his movement and did not make him feel as comfortable as he'd like. Sure, it was beautiful and gave him a certain grace that he could never achieve as a man, but nevertheless it was irritating. The reason he was wearing this garment was due to the fact that he somehow ended up in the past. A past where evidently a woman wearing pants or anything of the sort was cause for grumpy old men to chase after you, screaming harlot, throwing stones of all things, which he thought was totally uncalled for. That was fine with Naruto though. A ninja was trained to adapt to a situation, so he had snagged some clothes from a merchant and simply transformed into something aesthetically pleasing. The reason that he was whatever years before his time was so lame it made him lose respect for himself. Really, and it wasn't some cool mixture of badass jutsu or Kyuubi releasing some last-ditch effort to save both their asses, but a simple thing like misreading some random scroll. He hissed under his breath. He could have sworn he had gotten the whole reading thing down to a T. Jiraiya, God rest his soul, would sure to hear about this in the afterlife. Steeling himself to what could be a nasty fight, Naruto straightened out his newly feminine figure and walked out of the bush he was crouched at. A small shiver rippled throughout her body. Still need to get used to this female thing, he thought. Sure, he'd gone on missions when kunoichi were low and he needed to use his special techniques to transform into a woman, but this was different. This was an instance where he didn't have a choice in the matter but was forced to accept reality. Also, they were never the disguise in which he went in with. It was usually only meant for a couple of minutes. After a small demonstration to the Hokage though, it changed everything. It had actually surprised him that Tsunade had not known of it. The look on her face when he had transformed and had shyly looked at the floor, finger lightly touching her lip trying to be cute, was unforgettable. It wasn't the look of an embarrassed woman trying not to pay attention to a naked female, or the angry flame that burned in Sakura's eyes whenever he performed it by his lack of decency or some nonsense like that, but the cold, calculating look of a buyer suddenly realizing that its toy could do more, so much more. The evil grin that accompanied the look also didn't help. That day was followed by Tsunade adding missions to his schedule that he would never had actually considered carrying out. Missions such as befriending a young princess to help persuade her very rich and powerful father to open up trade routes that would help Konoha financially, not only civilian-wise but would bring in more missions, or seducing an insecure young man of a very powerful daimyo family, seduction of all things. Hell, he already had an idea of how to be sexy and feminine by observing his classmates and comrades. But the crash course in female behavior and skills that Shizune and Kurenai had given him had blown his mind. The things women did without even saying or doing anything gave him the chills. Well, all for the sake of the village. If he had to have sex with some guy, that was okay. Naruto wasn't some blushing heterosexual prude. He had a few experiences with men, but what made him guilty was tricking the man into becoming infatuated with him and using the jutsu for actual intercourse, which wasn't half bad. Besides, it wasn't like he hadn't done it with his clones before. Hey, always explore a jutsu to the fullest. It might get you places, he thought shamelessly. What didn't make him run out of the Hokage's office was the comedic relief that Kakashi-sensei had provided. He had been in the corner simply lagging behind after having given her a debriefing. He had not been reading his infamous orange novel, but had his hands in his pockets, giving off the air of someone who didn't give a damn. That facade had quickly melted when a very attractive and curvaceous young woman appeared in front of him, practically begging to be ravished. See, Hatake Kakashi was a man of honor and control, but there was only so much control he could have over certain situations. Sure, the rumors said he was a notorious ladies' man and was quite a catch, but that was all because of lack of information, which led him to be tagged as mysterious. Kakashi hadn't ever really had enough time to ever have more than 2 serious relationships, and those didn't even give him the experience that every woman in Konohakagure assumed he possessed. When one really thought about it, a grown man of his age didn't blush at a raunchy novel, or at least shouldn't. No, an experienced man would leer, smirk perversely, fuck around making lurid jokes, or even go back to a room and deal with his excitement, but the fabled student of the 4th Hokage did no such thing. Not many understood it, so they thought he was being risque and figuratively showing his feathers to attract sex partners, but that was not the case. Anko had been the one to catch on to this. A kunoichi who was as dangerous as she was beautiful, didn't rise in ranks by pure luck. She had the uncanny ability to see things others couldn't. She never really spoke to Kakashi, but on the off chance that she did, it would be a jab at his apparel or a simple message that a higher-ranked shinobi than her had sent her to deliver. He could tell it irked her being the messenger, but she had recently been demoted because of some reckless action that had completely and horrendously ruined a mission, someplace in IWA, he heard. What it was he didn't have the balls or energy to ask. A woman like Anko had too much pride, a very fragile thing in her case, strange as that may sound. Anko had been on a considerably bad mood one day when a stupid chunin thought she was just eye candy, as she so eloquently put it, and hadn't respected her. She had stomped up to him, eyes full of rage and nails biting into her palms, to drop a crumpled-up envelope in his lap. He had quirked his eyebrow up at her, confused but not really interested in her dilemma, so he looked down at the message. She responded by yelling in his face, "Don't fucking give me that look, you dumb-ass pansy. Don't try to act like you're the shit when you can barely handle not jerking yourself off on that shit you read all day. Seriously, go to the fucking red light district and get yourself laid." She finished dramatically by turning around and stomping back to wherever she came from. He had sat there trying not to look embarrassed and speechless, and resorted to pretending he didn't see the bewildered looks that passing civilians and shinobi alike gave him. It had taken weeks of indifference after the incident and many faraway assassination missions to get his rep back. Of course he didn't actually care. He was Hatake Kakashi, copy nin of more than 1,000 jutsu, but what worried him more was Guy. He had resorted to giving him these sad smiles like he felt sorry for him. No, a Hatake was good at everything, whether it was sex or lying about sex. Anyways, back to the situation. Kakashi-sensei's eyes had widened to an exuberant size, practically watering to the sudden exposure to the air. His nose hadn't bled like Naruto had expected, but his face had reddened by what he could see out of the mask. He could also see the clenched fists he had made in his pockets, a sure sign of trying to compose himself. And what really gave him a laugh was that after a few seconds of ogling, his hand rushed up to shield his eyes, like some kid. It still made him grin. The infamous copycat ninja embarrassed by the sight of a woman was too much to take. Naruto had even walked over to Kakashi, draping herself over him, and had whispered into his ear erotically, "What's wrong, Kakashi-sensei? Are you in PI?" and had softly bit his earlobe then? To which he responded by giving a small whimper and had even excused himself, stuttering and stumbling over himself to try and escape out the window, which failed because it had been ninja-proofed, so he had to shamefully stumble out through the main door, trying not to stare at his student on the way out. Kakashi never looked at Naruto the same way after that. Serves that pervert right, he thought with glee. Mentally returning to himself, Naruto walked out through the bush that she had been hiding in. Might as well refer to myself as a woman, don't wanna fuck this up more than I've already have. Okay, female speech, female speech, female speech. Keep it old school. The man who had been sulking before also straightened himself out and donned on a menacing face, hoping to scare the young woman off. "What is your business here?" he said with a deep baritone voice, almost a yell but not quite there. Naruto of course suspected this. Sheesh, they are all the same arrogant assholes. I'm sorry, but I seem to have drifted off onto uncharted territory. Do you happen to know where I am? I sure hope you won't mind me trespassing, she said, voice softer than he was used to ever using, and simply stared into the eyes of the man with the ridiculous hair patiently. He better not trap me in some stupid genjutsu, freaking hate those. You have strayed quite a ways if you have made it to this hut. If it were not for me, then you might not have found help for some time, he said with the air of someone who was used to being regarded as a hero. The man's eyes did a quick survey of the woman before him, and another arrogant look came across his face. Trying her best not to snort, Naruto gave a tight smile and opened her mouth to give some lame comeback, but was rudely interrupted when her supposed savior all but yelled, "Have you no shame, woman? Put some footwear on." He chastised, talking down to her like she was some submissive woman. The accuser smirked at the woman in front of him. Though he did not show it, he was surprised she was not cowering in his presence, not to forget that she was breathtakingly beautiful. It was rare to see a woman with such poise and confidence that this woman radiated, not to mention she had the most peculiar hair color he had ever seen. Numerous questions ran through his brain. From what foreign lands has she come from? Was it actually yellow? Or perhaps it was even gold? The way the sun made it shine almost convinced him of the latter possibility. Though what really caught his attention were her eyes, so blue. Being born into a family of high skill and value had led him to have quite a few admirers, but none caught his attention for more than a few weeks. It was the eyes that always convinced him to drop relationships. If one were to strip it down and put it simply, they could say he had a fetish for eyes. These eyes were different though. He had to stop himself from staring too intently. He wondered how they would look angry. Eyes were so peculiar when it came to emotions. Being the master of his own set, he liked watching how other eyes reacted to fear, joy, anger, love, sadness, insanity. "Oh, well, though I am a visitor of these lands, I am no stranger to the wilderness. I assure you I would have been perfectly fine, and my lack of shoes is my own personal choice. I find the feel of the earth beneath me rather pleasing," she said pleasantly, tilting her head the slightest degree to the left. As if by book, the man simply stared at her open face, trying hard not to burn holes at the exposed neck. Naruto had to keep himself from smirking, yet totally walked into that. After a few seconds of what may have been an awkward silence, if Naruto gave a fuck, the uptight asshole, as Naruto pegged him, cleared his throat and replied simply, "Yes." Then, after trying to start a sentence, just stopped and simply stared at her, unsure of what to do. At this, Naruto couldn't hold it back anymore as she let out a carefree laugh, which widened the eyes of the sullen man and made him a bit uncomfortable. Naruto, always a joker, couldn't help it. He was a woman for the time being, but to make one of the strongest people he ever had the chance to meet uncomfortable just by a subtle hint of innuendo and body language was completely ridiculous. Figuring her fun was over, she stopped suddenly, and remembered the time she was in. "Oh wait. I'm like pretty much being a total flirt, isn't like showing the elbow pretty bad in itself, but to be barefoot and purposefully have the neck exposed, I don't know," he thought with dread. "Let's just hope this doesn't bite me in the ass." "Please excuse me, you surprised me, and well, I do enjoy laughing, you see. Now that I've had a time to relax, I think I know where I am. I shall go to my friends now." With that, she gave a small smile and whirled around to get away as soon as possible. She never got to take more than 2 steps as he grabbed her wrist firmly and started walking briskly to the north, switching her direction completely. "Great, what did I get myself into? Do something and hightail it out of her. Now!" she silently screamed to himself. "Sir, unhand me, you are being rough with me, I will not be led around like some child." Naruto was panicking. Did he figure it out? Is he gonna put me in the slammer? He didn't respond, just gave her an irritated look and kept on walking, dragging her along. With an exasperated sigh, she warned him, "Well, I am sorry, but I did caution you," and promptly flicked her wrist and had him laying on the ground. The look of surprise on his face made her want to gloat, but instead she leaned down and whispered menacingly, "You know, you have to treat ladies more gently than that, not only because you can harm them physically, but they can fight back and hurt you terribly as well." She gave him a rather cocky grin, and with the speed that years of training gave him, blurred out of existence and ran off to anywhere that was not the here, leaving a very disgruntled grown man behind. What she didn't see, though, was the smirk that was slowly appearing on his face, and the eyes glittered with amusement and excitement. "Do you think it is that easy to run away from me, the master of the Sharingan, Uchiha Madara? Silly woman," and with that his body blurred, leaving no trace of the little scuffle behind. Naruto whooped with glee. "I totally knocked him out." He laughed with delight as he tensed and jumped across a small field, landing with a thump on one of the great trees Fire Country was so famous for. A familiar sense of comfort ran throughout his body as he felt the wind sweep past his. He sniffed lightly and could tell that a storm would soon descend over them. "I could use a shower," he thought jokingly. Looking down, he noticed that the pristine kimono that he had started with was now smudged with dirt and torn at random spots due to the branches wiping his body. He had been running for a good half hour for good measure. It also felt good to let loose and feel his muscles strain with the force of blurring in and out of the plant life. If he really wanted to, he could throw on a simple transformation to override the last one he had put on it, but that wasn't really necessary. "Hopefully, I can get out of this get-up soon, anyway," he said to no one in particular. Closing his eyes, he leaned slightly against a massive tree and let his body relax. Thanks to the senjutsu training, he could feel the natural energy of the tree emanating below his, lazily flowing about his body and around anything that surrounded it. If he wished, he could open his body up and let all that invigorating yet relaxing energy flow throughout his body, strengthening his body tremendously. He wasn't about to kill some powerhouse, so he simply took a taste of it and shook off the rest of the energy. Sighing deeply, he languidly opened his eyes and stared out into the space before his. It was about mid-morning, so the field was illuminated nicely. It wasn't anything special, just some overgrown shrubs and weeds surrounded by looming trees. He squinted and caught a glimpse of a rabbit hop into its home. Expanding his view, he also saw a black bird swoop into the grass, followed by a call. After staring at nothing in particular for a while, he saw a sapling that caught his attention. Jumping down from the branch he had been standing on, he walked through the shrubbery and slowed until he was staring up at a young tree. It was an ordinary tree, nothing spectacular about it, but what really caught his attention were the scorch marks that marred its young trunk. He leaned closely and extended his arm and touched it tentatively. Carefully he peeled back a little of the burnt bark and revealed a clean surface below, though a bit jagged. A sense of nostalgia hit his and sent his mind reeling. This is, whispering out of all, his eyes watered. Training Field 6A. Naruto stumbled back and did a retake on the scenery around him. The field now had a deeper meaning to it. What was before a messy area of the forest turned into the well-kept if not roughened-up training area for young shinobi. The sapling then transformed into a mighty tree, with mammoth leaves the size of his head. Now almost 10 times its size, the scar remained, but not as pronounced. A ghost of a small child peeked out from behind it and ran past him screaming, followed by 2 more laughing faces, hands held out in front of them. Naruto blinked rapidly, trying to have the mirage-like scene disappear. Nothing happened as the 3 kids continued to play their game of tag. Voices of joy rang out as one of the fellow children was captured by the tallest of the 3. The short boy got tackled to the ground and screamed out with excitement as the last of the trio descended on the boy and started to tickle him vigorously. Peals of laughter erupted from the young lad as his friends continued to attack his body. Finally, after seconds of agonizing torture, the boy held his hands up in surrender and accepted his fate. The 2 other children simply smirked and picked him up quickly. Mouths moved quickly, babbling about some nonsense to do with action figures and candy. 3 sets of eyes lit up with glee as a verdict was reached to go beg for some delicious candy. Nodding with a determined look on all their faces, they ran off in the direction of what he imagined was the village bazaar. Moments passed by as a young, blonde-haired boy slid out behind a boulder, a limp to his step. The child looked longingly out to the recently departed trio. A small whimper escaped the boy as he stepped on a sharp rock, his bare feet giving him no protection. The blonde's legs crumpled from underneath him as his frail body could no longer hold himself up. Naruto watched it all unfold before his. A strong emotion washed over him as knowledge of what was going to happen next hit him. A young chunin around 20 walked up to the crying child and kneeled in front of him, a smile on his face. The shinobi sat on his haunches and took the sad child into his arms, whispering reassuring thoughts into the boy's ears. The child quickly perked up and hugged the man with the biggest hug a small child could muster, and gave a loud whoop. The chunin gave a kind smile and stood up and placed the child around his shoulders, and then they too walked off into the distance. The vision wavered slightly, then disappeared altogether as Naruto let himself fall and rolled onto his back. Silent tears rolling down his cheeks as he replayed incident over and over in his head. If one were to happen onto the young woman crying, they would think something terrible had just happened and would have politely excused themselves. Or if they held some courage, stay and speak to the woman and reassure her. What was actually strange about the situation was that Naruto was not sad, or even bothered in the slightest. He was happy, so happy in fact that tears poured down his face. The flashback that he had just experienced was one of his fondest memories. It was the day that he had almost summoned up enough courage to ask the village kids to play with him, but they had ran off to eat sweets. He had not had such a high self-esteem back then, and had thought they had disappeared because of his presence. What reassured him that they had not run off because of him was the chunin who had happened to stumble upon the field to witness everything play out. It was before he had met Irika and all of his precious people. It was one of those rare moments when a villager had not begrudged him for the demon that had been forced inside, or had helped him out just to brag about it, but because that man had truly cared. He never got the name of the kind chunin, or any other fact that could help trace him, but that memory always stuck a chord in his heart. He let his eyelids fall and was about to take a nice lone nap when something disrupted his peace. "Woman! Where are you?" A male voice could be heard from a ways away. "Shit, it's the freakazoid from earlier." Trying not to have the panic show on his face, Naruto tried to think of a plan that wouldn't attract too much attention. "Okay, from the sounds of it he's about 120 meters away, so that gives me about 5 minutes to escape. Unless he's determined, then that gives me about 90 seconds. He quickly calculated, hoping it was right. He had tried to be more into the mathematical sections of shinobi life, thanks to some unwilling help from Shikamaru, but at times things didn't always work. A few seconds he heard some shrubs rustling, marking the target closer. Damn it, why did it have to be Madara of all people? Hoping he would have enough time, he quickly set about setting up some traps just in case things got out of hand. A trip wire here, some exploding tags there, and a couple of emergency cage bunchen awaiting orders just to keep it simple. 20 seconds left. With the remaining time he had left, he composed himself and laid back down in front of the scarred tree and pretended to be at peace with himself and nature. Yeah, hope he buys it. Found you, Madara said. If Naruto wasn't pretending so hard to be relaxed, he could have sworn there was a hint of glee in that phrase. That totally wasn't there, it's all in your head. Hello, and what exactly have you found? Naruto said, trying to be sly, and gave him a grin. The woman who laid your ass who happened upon your home accidentally. I was about to doze off. Is there something that is wrong? I would be all too glad to help. Fuck, this feminine talk takes up too much energy. He, though exasperated, usually when he did go on these gender bender missions he prepared himself more. He had time to research the speech pattern, common dialects, and behavior that a certain region used. Then took several days memorizing them and incorporating them right before he left. He also had to imagine himself being a native, not just an intruder. Though that was only half of what he did, the rest had to do with that fragile thing upstairs. The right mental state was of utmost importance. Kurenai had stressed that in him most determinedly. He could just hear her voice now. Naruto, being a woman isn't just all looks and trying to act cute. You must remember that this is also a type of recon mission. You are collecting data that can be vital to your survival and most importantly to help this village thrive. You can't simply transform yourself and act the way you normally do. A woman can only get away with so much. When a woman does not act the way people expect her to act, especially on a mission, attention gets drawn to her. Do you understand me? Do. Not. Attract. Attention. She had continued to lecture him on the aspects of being woman, and that though it did irritate her that some men were extremely chauvinistic, that he should not let that get to him, or get him to lose his head. Before going out to accomplish your mission you must get into the mind of a female. You can't simply act. You have to be a woman. I recommend doing a bit of rearranging and meditating within your mind at least 1 to 2 days ahead of time. It will help keep your mind stable and prevent you from breaking from character. Don't worry, Kurenai-san, I got this. It's like Senjutsu training, boob edition. He had laughed it off and was about to transform when Kurenai's eyes had lit up with fire and her fists had clenched audibly. That had earned him a couple bonks on the head. Well, that was how many he counted before he had been out of commission. He of course had apologized profusely and had made it up to her by buying her an expensive sweater made out of some cashmere material he had researched women loved. Letting out a small sigh, Naruto let his mind go still, letting past mission run through his mind, squeezing hours of meditation into a few seconds. Get your act together, Naruto, this isn't some mission you can mess up. This is time you are screwing with, ain't no fixing this. Focusing back on the present, his eyes took in the sight before him. Uchiha Madara was staring at him way too intently. His eyes were, swear to God, glittering. His plain blue shirt and dark shorts were in perfect condition, asshole. His hair though was in disarray with patched of spiked bangs sticking up while the longer layers in the back were matted down by what he supposed was sweat. Hair can't always look so perfect now, can you? I'm the son of the freaking Yellow Flash. You can't catch me without breaking a sweat. You will come with me. I didn't pardon you from my estate. I am within my right to hold you accountable for the harm you inflicted upon my property, he said with a slight uplift of the corner of his mouth. If he hadn't been used to hanging around bastard Uchihas he would have missed it, and mistaken the demand and something to be feared, but being on the team with the sole survivor of the clan, these types of facial quirks were easy to spot. Translation: Uchiha Madara was amused as hell and he knew he could do whatever he wanted and no one would protest. Well fuck, if he was gonna play that card, then Naruto would sure as hell deal. Really? An estate in which you were about to do who knows what to a lost and terrified woman. I believe that is grounds for my own terms of having you punished. You, sir, are not faring well in terms of being a diplomat. What will my family think of such dishonorable deeds? Naruto retorted, and tried to slide up as gracefully as possible to a sitting position, hands laid delicately on his now full bosom, brows furrowed in mock contemplation. A flicker of something Naruto couldn't quite recognize passed through Madara's eyes as he did this. Please tell me he's a little apprehensive. I all but accused him of attempted rape. Naruto silently prayed. You couldn't really mess with a guy if he didn't feel bad to begin with. Madara's head reeled back at the implications the woman before him accused him of. An Uchiha did not need to resort to such disgusting actions. Women were all but throwing themselves at his feet. His mind ran a mile a minute as reasons as to why she was goading him into this situation. Was she someone to be reckoned with? This woman, this hellion, says she is of high authority. Who would listen to her? But if she says she is a diplomat, one that speaks so loosely, then I may be treading into dangerous grounds. Could she perhaps be of the Senju clan? A small pang of fear ran throughout his body. Was she sent here to entice him into unfavorable actions which could endanger his possibility of being village leader? He gave her another look over, but nothing about spoke of those cursed Senju attributes. The only thing that was dominantly Senju was her attitude, that they were so damned proud of. Of course she was not of the Senju. Perhaps she was not part of a clan at all. A possible Yamanaka, but they were weak-brained fools who thought all minds were easy to probe. Besides, the Yamanaka was a barely established family, boasting no more than a few members, hardly one to fear. Her speed earlier was extremely impressive, though speed was not always of shinobi attributes. It could also be of some hobby or pastime in which a bored woman might partake in. He wasn't too sure. But other than that, nothing about her gave off the ninja vibe that most of his comrades did. There were only a handful of kunoichi, and those were medic-nin, too afraid to leave the comfort of home. What was more probable was that she was a mere visitor hoping to see the fireworks between the Uchiha and Senju. Coming to a decision, he relaxed as he pegged her to be harmless. Nice try. A female such as yourself could not even dream of coming up to my standards. It would have almost been worth it. He contemplated as he stared into her eyes yet again. Such beauty wasted on a nobody. Perhaps he could have a quick romp and be done with her. Your lies are wasted. I do not need to waste so much time with a woman like you. Your connections, or whatever they may be, will provide me with a good laugh. Let's be quick about it and get it over with. He gave her a self-assured smile as he bent down to grab her arm. Naruto stared at the man as if he grew another head. Was he fucking serious? So he thinks I'm some poor woman trying to get into his pants? Well, let's see if he likes this. With the swiftness that only a well-trained shinobi could attain, Naruto whipped out his hand and slapped the irritating bastard twice before leaping over the confused Uchiha and hit him upside the head. It's on, bitch. If I could just punch that grin off your face. Did that connect well with you, HM? I might have you a bit hard, perhaps you should lie down. Naruto all but mocked him, his voice all but dripped with sarcasm. Here, let me help you, he said with a sugary sweet voice, then aimed a kick for his head. To hell with all this bullshit. To his surprise, Madara spun on his heel and caught her dainty foot, with a bruising grip. So she is trained, he thought. Perhaps this woman was not so harmless after all. Perhaps she could provide him with entertainment other than carnal pleasure. He grabbed her leg with both arms and swung her towards the nearest tree. Well, not so well trained if she couldn't stop that, he thought, trying to hide his disappointment. Not bothering to look back, he waited for the crack of her body hitting the wood. Silence was all that followed. Well, perhaps I didn't throw her far enough. Turning around to see his work, his face was met with a punch so severe that it sent him into the trees. Naruto smiled as he saw Madara crash into the forest and knock down 2 trees. Damn, I was aiming for 4. He all but pouted as he saw the dark head of Here bob up from the debris. Hey, don't underestimate me. I may be a woman, but weak is weak, know what I mean? He yelled across to him, hands cupped around his mouth. With that said, he expected some fireball jutsu aimed his way, but all he saw was Madara's head laid against a broken branch. Maybe I killed him. Dusting his kimono off, he made his way to the site of the crash to see what was up. About halfway there he froze as he felt a familiar chakra surge. Turning his head slightly, he was met with a pair of Sharingan eyes, then everything went black. Naruto awoke. With one of the biggest headaches in his life. Considering much of what he's been through, that was said a few things about his predicament. Though, Naruto did not awake on a dungeon floor, or a comfy bed, or hell, not even chained up as he was accustomed to, but on top of mats with blankets covering his body. Wah! He said slowly, then shot up as a cold pressure was applied to his exposed jugular. The sudden jump caused straw-colored blankets and bandages to fly everywhere. Grabbing the imposing whatever it was, Naruto made quick work of tackling it to the ground and safely securing its movements. All the while the sleeping materials slowly drifted to the floor to land harmlessly on him and the soon-to-be dead man, which was really hairy, by the way. Wait, not even Ero-sensei was this hairy. Might help if I actually take a look at this damned thing, Naruto thought, as he quickly grabbed the blanket and whipped it off them. What confronted his eyes gave him a worse headache than before. Woof? A dog. Great. Quickly Naruto let go of the canine, who was now wagging its stump of a tail at him, seemingly having forgotten that he was about 10 seconds away from dying. Taking a look at the dog, which Eni noticed was not a menacing shinobi at all, but a long-haired, ashy-colored mutt with a long snout and short tail. All Naruto could do was sigh. You are one ugly dog, he whispered to the mutt, which only caused the said dog to wag its tail harder and let out a loud arf. I'm not complimenting you, he yelled, but squatted down and started petting him and scratching him behind the ears nonetheless, which was rewarded by a very furious face licking. Naruto let out a small chuckle and whipped the slobber off with his bandaged hand. Whoa, back up, back up, back up, when was I ever injured? Finally taking a look at his surroundings, which I should have done the second I woke up, Naruto noticed the small room he was in. It was about the same size as his bedroom in the old apartment he used to live in. Almost 14 by 16 he could estimate. The light coming in through the windows was clear and bright, typical mid-afternoon weather, so I'm guessing it's lunchtime. He thought as his stomach gave a fierce growl and proceeded to annoy the fuck out of him. Slowly getting up and stretching out all the kinks throughout his body, he surveyed the room in more detail. The walls were bare, as the floor, as well as the ceiling. No signs of life other than the mud were in the room. He looked down to take a closer look at the bandages. Picking them up in his hands, he noticed they were pristine white and extremely flexible. Very good bandages, to say the least. He slowly popped his neck and turned around. Ugh, man! I feel so much better! He exclaimed as he did a few quick stretches. Spying a table in the otherwise empty room, he noticed a folded piece of brown paper on it. Walking slowly, he looked down at the neat and precise writing of what he assumed was the prick who knocked him out. Who was it again? Holy shit! Uchiha fucking Madara, that's who! What if I'm in a genjutsu ever since I woke up? Maybe I'm dead. This stopped him. A shiver ran through his body, but then he thought back to the small scuffle between him and Madara. Nah, I'm too awesome. Picking up the paper, he read the greeting he supposed, addressed to woman. You are in one of my smaller estates. You have by now been bandaged and rested. Do not leave the room. Do not cause a commotion, or I will handle you. No signature, no ending, just a threat. Well, excuse me. Letting out an annoyed huff, Naruto crumpled up the paper and threw it into a corner of the room. Like I'm going to wait around here all day, fuck that. He cursed loudly. Naruto hated being bored. In fact, he was rarely bored at all. Between the training, the mission taking, and overall hanging with his friends and comrades, there really wasn't time to be bored. Well, maybe an hour here or there, he admitted to no one in particular. That's how he had picked up this bad swearing habit. A man with nothing to do usually led to bad things. Speaking of which, where is Madara? Is he watching me, analyzing me? Subconsciously, he looked over his shoulder, hoping to find a clue of the perpetrator in question. Nope, still nothing in sight. Looking down at the dog, he noticed he was wearing a red collar. Of course. Who knew the Uchiha took pets? I bet they keep you till you're all fat and eat you. He taunted and patted the top of the dog's head. He only whined and sat down on its haunches. Letting out another carefree laugh, Naruto just smirked, kidding. Looking over the sliding doors, he decided he was going to hightail it out of there. With a determined shoulder tensing, he started to stride over, hand in midair ready to open his gateway to freedom. You know, when a man tells you to stay put, you follow his orders, a deep voice said from behind him. Whipping around, he stood in a battle stance, ready for whatever the Uchiha was going to throw his way. I didn't even sense him. I only take orders from those worthy of it, he said slowly, words filled with anger. Can't really admit that I take orders from a Hokage that doesn't exist. All Madara did was raise his brow. Fucking Uchihas, I especially don't take orders from you. And what determines such a high esteem? A dog, perhaps? He motioned towards the dog at his feet, which stood up and followed the hand and started licking it generously. Then without warning, he grabbed the dog by his collar and threw him through the door, causing both sliding doors to crumble and fall. A whimper was heard amongst the rubble. Naruto's eyes widened, his hands clenched at his sides. What the hell is wrong with you? Are you as stupid as you look? He shouted, his female voice making the end of his shout more like a high-pitched screech. He quickly turned around and ran towards the door, pushing pieces of random rice paper and would aside, hoping to find the dog. Exposing my back to save a dog, well, I can take him if I need to, if all he can do is fight like in the meadow. Subconsciously, Naruto knew that if it wasn't for the era or the way he had surprised the man, he wouldn't have gotten very far. He had to remind himself that this was one of strongest Uchiha in existence, whose eyes and skills could probably snuff him out in no time. But Naruto didn't want to admit it to himself, so he continued to look for a sign of life. Getting to the bottom of the pile, he found nothing but the collar. What he whispered, other than that, there was no sign of the dog, not even a loose shaggy clump of fur. Foolish woman, there never was a dog, it was merely a genjutsu, he said with the voice of such authority that just pissed Naruto off, causing him to glare daggers at him. Perhaps you do not know what that means? Madara crossed his arms, ready to lecture. Let me explain, it is an image or ill. I know what it means. He cut him off coldly. To think that I fell for a lame-ass illusion like that. Get it together, Naruto, a badass jounin like yourself doesn't fall for these tricks anymore. Uchiha Madara simply stood there, chin tilted upwards, hands crossed in front of him, the poster boy for arrogant asses. Now if Naruto had been his younger self, he would have launched himself at him, damned the results of who won. But that was the old Naruto, though he still had problems with his anger, and with rushing into things, he had better grasp on them. He would behave like the diplomat that he supposedly set himself up for and fight with his words, not his fists. Are you satisfied? Naruto asked simply, staring at the man quizzically, letting out a small taste of killing intent. Subtle enough that you wouldn't exactly notice it, but strong enough to set an uneasy feeling about the room. What do you mean? Madara said apprehensively, arms slowly uncrossing. That's right, you do not have the upper hand. With this, he motioned with his arms spread out, this whole manipulative, useless ploy? I don't see a point for all this tomfoolery. Do men like you like to waste chakra on self-assigned missions that do no good? He said, crossing his own arms across his chest, resting slightly under that were hidden from view thanks to the tight kimono. An unsure look passed Madara's eyes as he considered the question. He watched the woman watch him, eyes intense with not anger but with determination. What are you trying to get at? She slowly started to circle him, very carefully, close enough to see the expressions on her face, but not too far as to have the necessary proximity to grab her in an attempt to subdue her. She is extremely well trained. He thought. Not many ninja in general remembered to keep the minimum radius that older shinobi tried to teach the new and wet behind-the-ear trainees. Stay out of it, and you could still fight or escape, but stay within it, and close combat was all you could try, or die if you got lucky. He slowly shifted in the direction she walked as to not keep his back to her. I must take her seriously. Or what, he thought, what could this woman do to me? He came to a sudden realization. He took in her demeanor, her stance, her eyes, and lastly, tasted the killer intent that had now intensified. Intensified so much so, and with such a degree that the hairs on the back of his neck stood up. She could kill me. He thought with wonder, almost awe. He had seen the way she had handled herself with the dog. 2 seconds. That's how long it had taken her to react, analyze, summarize, and execute a decision. This woman, this kunoichi was what the name entailed. A killer. This would have angered him in any other case. A person, let alone a woman who could possibly take him down, was an insult to his pride, his training, and his family. This was different though. He had assessed the situations they had been in, and the ways she reacted. Thinking back to the meadow, he thought of the way she had been laying in the grass. At first he thought he had caught her by surprise, his ego getting in the way of seeing the actual potential for death that had been waiting for him. As they had their small battle, it was not till he was up out of the trees he had destroyed to notice the trip wire laid throughout the field. 2 or 6 meters to his left, while a deathly kunai trap was hidden underneath a weak genjutsu 14 meters to his northeast. Stepping out of the rubble, he also noticed 50 exploding tags, slightly exposed, and those were only the ones he spotted. A thrill of excitement once again ran through his body. She knew I would find her. Was she hoping for it? He observed all this as he strengthened the genjutsu he had cast ever since he was sent flying. He watched her as she neared the place of his supposed defeat. He caught a snippet of what she was yelling towards him, something about being weak when he realized he had enough of this. With a quick chakra surge he activated his Sharingan. This caused the woman to turn quickly, catching her eyes quickly. He sent a pinpoint, needle-like command to her chakra system, cease. Causing her body to interpret it as a forced feint, he caught her quickly and threw her over his shoulder. As expected, she was very light and had no problem walking towards his destination, no need to waste chakra on a body flicker or transportation jutsu. Arriving upon his destination, he looked upon the small housing estate his family had given him for a birthday years past. Though he in part was leader of the Uchiha along with the occasional help from his brother Azuna, their parents still gifted them on occasions. The dark roof and matching walls helped it blend in at night, but during the day it was a bit imposing. It was sizable for a man but not too big as to attract attention. It was about a half a day's walk from the main estate, or about 4 hours if you were in a hurry. The hose was mainly composed of 3 independent rooms connected by hallways. The biggest one, facing the main estate, was his training dojo, while the smaller 2 were for basic sleeping and leisure activities. His parents had offered a small number of attendants to care for the place, but he had rejected it, in order to keep himself more private. He did send them once every other week to make sure the garden and spring was taken care of. The spring was a small one to say the least. After some testing and experimentation, his family had deemed it safe and had laid down a small wooden barrier behind the housing and around the spring as to keep animals and unwanted guests away. He would come at least once a month to absorb the minerals and mediate for whatever he needed. He could say it was one of his most favorite attributes. He walked up the few steps there was and into one of the basic rooms he rarely went into. He removed the cargo on his shoulder and set all his armor and shoes in a convenient cubbyhole his attendants had put in for him a few weeks ago. Setting the woman on her back, he positioned her in the middle of the room, not really knowing what to do with her. Taking a quick look over her body, he didn't notice any sizable injuries, so he simply stood there observing her. The soft huff of her breath was about the only noise that alerted him that anyone besides himself was there. He noted the once beautiful kimono was now covered in patches of dirt and ripped at the sleeves and hem. Her scarlet obi had also begun to unwind with the rest of her garments, and was lying underneath her like a violent slash of blood. He also noticed that thanks to her loose clothing, he could take a look at the swell of her and the way that matched her breathing. His eyes trailed up to look at the smooth expanse of her neck and the farther upwards to the soft pink lips, parted slightly. He subconsciously looked away. He was used to females laying themselves down for him, but this felt wrong, so he simply walked to the table, only piece of furniture in the room, and opened up the drawer underneath, and picked out the few bandages he had in the house. Closing it slowly, he continues to sit himself close to the woman and bandage her left hand, which he noticed had a very deliberate kunai slash from her thumb to her pinky. It seemed a few hours old, surely not from their scuffle earlier, but formed something before. I wonder, nameless woman, are you here to cause havoc? Having his thoughts return to the present, Madara once again assessed the female before him. He had come up with one main point. She was a true kunoichi. A person who could smile but cut with her eyes, cry but fill your lungs and drown you, lightly slap you but shatter your bones. That was the essence of the way of the ninja. Being subtle but deadly at the same time, that is what it took. Many shinobi took different way of achieving this success, whether it be by hiding behind loud words, or masking yourself with flashy clothes, but not her. She was like the belladonna he had heard of in the faraway lands. Simply and pretty to look at, but one taste could send you into a delirious state of hell and death. There was only few ways not to succumb to its enchantments, but to ignore it, or carefully dissect and examine it to learn its ways. He realized he had stopped moving with her and was just staring into space, which was soon filled with her wicked face, eyes closed, smiling mischievously at him. Now, what do you have to say about that? She said almost too cheerfully. And nothing. He slowly stuttered out. I cannot be too careful. He had to swallow his pride, take a low hit, and take this woman as seriously as he would any man, and any trained shinobi. Why does she make me so nervous? She does not even own up to Azuna's strength and skill, yet I am frightened by her. Why? And nothing, he heard Madara say. Surprised and struck by the blunt answer, Naruto took a step back. He was expecting a cocky answer and death threat, not this, an obvious answer that didn't require yelling or more argumentation. Nothing, he slowly repeated to himself pensively. Naruto looked down at his dirt-stained feet and then up towards the man with the deadly eyes. Being sure to avoid his gaze and stare at his neck, Naruto lifted his left hand and laid it gently on Madara's shoulder. Then why, he gripped it harder. Do you waste? His other hand mirrored the left and slowly made their way towards his collarbone. Your time doing it? He said as he applied enough pressure to be uncomfortable on the man that would screw his future over. So close to the man Naruto was that he could almost hear the thump-thump of Madara's heart. Whether it was nervousness or something else he didn't know, he only knew one thing. He was this close to breaking his collarbone and kicking his ass. The only fact holding him back was that he knew, just knew, that killing him would muddle up his future and the future of Konoha even more than help fix it. No matter what anger he had towards the Tobi/Madara of the future, this Madara had done nothing wrong besides be an asshole. He had heard that one time Uchiha Madara hadn't that bad of a guy, a jerk at times and power hungry, but he had supposedly been trying to protect his clan. And who can blame a man who would do anything to protect those he cared for? Letting out a long sigh, Naruto released the hold he had on the man, which he was pretty sure Madara could have broken if he wanted to, then stepped back and dared to look at his eyes. Even bastards deserve a chance. It's up to you, scumbag. One wrong move and I gladly kill you. You know what? Prove me all that was for naught. Who are you, and what do you want from me? He asked almost hopelessly. He crossed his arms once again and leaned back, putting his weight on his right leg, and waited for an answer. Speaking frankly, Madara answered, I am Uchiha Madara, leader of the Uchiha clan, and I want to get to know you, he said almost as hopelessly. Almost as if he himself was also unsure of the answer. He stepped up to the woman and motioned to her. Who are you and what do you want from me? He repeated. Naruto tried not to smirk. He was not expecting an almost want-to-be my friend request. How juvenile. Well, Naruto was good with juvenile. Hell, if the bastard turned out to be good and he fixed up his fucked up demeanor, he might even fix the Uchiha clan and all their angst at the same time. He smiled with all his teeth and scratched the back of his neck. Well, that's easy, I'm Naruto, and I guess we'll find out what I want later, he said loudly and stuck out his hand. Which Madara took apprehensively and shook. If I play my cards right, there'll be no more pissy Uchihas, no more better than thou attitude, no more Akatsuki, and no more trouble for future Konohagakure. What could go wrong? Naruto thought happily as he set himself a new goal. Besides, he was good at this. Madara couldn't be that fucked up. For first dates, Naruto could say this was one of the lousiest. He hadn't gone on many bad dates in his time, seeing as how awesome and badass he was, but to put it lightly, this was a lousy date. To make a simple list of why it was so horrid, here's how Naruto sorted it out. He was now a woman, was at this date against his will, in a different time period, in an isolated area, with a dangerous man, and to top it all off, he was drinking tea. Fucking tea. Though Naruto knew the health benefits that tea provided, and at times the taste wasn't so bad, he just hated it. He hated how he had to wait for it to steep or whatever they called, he hated the aftertaste that got stuck in the back of his throat and also burned, but most of all, what he really despised was the forced and uncomfortable conversations that always seemed to come up whenever he partook in this beverage. This current situation had to be the winner of awkward conversations of them all. This estate belongs solely to me. Looking up from his intense staring of the dark cup before him, Naruto nodded slowly. That's nice. A minute of silence later. Did you build it? No. Oh. Of course. After a few more pregnant seconds, and no continuation of the topic, Naruto looked back down at the offensive liquid. A few small ripples flowed through the small cup layered before him. What am I supposed to talk about? Oh hey, so about not being a weirdo, how about you stop and become a good guy? Yeah, for some reason that didn't sound like it would work. Sighing softly, Naruto braced himself and lifted the slowly cooling cup to his lips. Just a sip, maybe it's actually good, maybe it's ramen flavor. Right. Finally making up his mind, he parted his lips to let the warm liquid flow into his mouth, and ended up almost choking to death in the process. Madara quickly got up from the other side of the only table in the room and quickly stepped to her side. It's okay, I'm fine, no help necessary, Naruto said between coughs and gasps for air. Staring down at her apprehensively, he didn't budge. After a few deep steadying breaths, Naruto wiped the few tears that had appeared at the corner of his eyes and smiled up at him. See, perfectly fine, it's going to take a lot more than a cup of bitter tea to kill me, remember? Though it started out nice enough, the last few words came out a little slower and laced with a subtle reminder of the power this slip of a woman could do. Madara's body language didn't give anything away, but Naruto noticed a slight tensing around the eyes. Yes, I remember. After a few tense seconds, Naruto sighed once more. Stop pushing his buttons and start being nice. It was hard, seeing as how he was kind of a dick, but Naruto didn't befriend some of the most powerful people in the shinobi world with his looks and asshole behavior, or maybe he sort of did, but being a woman changed that. He had to be powerful and threatening in subtle ways. Not only that, but he had to use his feminine charm. He motioned towards the spot in front of him and smiled softly this time. Please, let's start over. This went on for a little longer with his arm extended, and the Uchiha staring at him, but no movement occurred. Finally having enough, Naruto quickly stood up from under that table and, to Madara's concealed surprise, pressed his palms to his back and pushed him towards his original position. Okay, now sit, he said sternly and tugged down on his shirt. Madara didn't budge. If Naruto didn't know any better, he'd swear he was screwing with him. What Uchihas do best. Sit, he said more forcefully his time, emphasized by pressing down on his shoulders. I prefer to stand, Madara said, looking off into the distance. What? If I do remember correctly, you forced me to sit and have tea with you. Naruto all but seethed. His hands now in front of him, clasped together tightly, trying desperately to uphold the feminine stance. Keep calm. I clearly said it was close to tea time, Madara said calmly. The corner of Naruto's mouth twitched. Oh yeah, my bad. All the man did was slightly turn his head and give her a strange look. You're bad? Languing. No slang, you must stick to character. Let's see, I need to have a background. Naruto reprimanded himself. It's a common phrase in my little village. It means that I acknowledge a mistake or something of the sort. As you might know, I'm not native to these lands, Naruto said as smoothly as possible and bounced on his feet, forcing another smile onto his face, hoping that the feminine features would subdue the suspicion. Now please, let's sit, he said and once again motioned towards the floor. My decision stays the same, the frustrating man said coldly, and simple brushed a bang out of his face still slightly showing amusement, and facing the wall as if contemplating something. Okay, tough guy, I tried. Having enough of this game, Naruto decided to use physical force. With his lightning-fast reflexes, Naruto quickly shot out his leg and kicked Madara behind his knees, all the while at the same time flowing chakra to his hands and slamming down on his shoulders and forcing him to the floor. To his satisfaction, The Uchiha didn't react soon enough, so he ended up on the ground with a stunned look on his face, a simple oof slipping out of his mouth. "Now, let's be civil and get to know each other," Naruto commented sweetly as he leaned next to him and gave him a sickly sweet smile. "Sound good?" Madara clenched his teeth and tensed his right arm. "Shit!" Naruto thought quickly and jumped over the table and landed across the room, hands at the ready. Looking across the room, he didn't see any sign of the Uchiha. A second later, a fist slammed into his right shoulder, and he was sent flying towards the delicate shoji doors. Bracing for the fall, he slammed his hands on the tatami mats right before hitting the doors and spun his legs in a quick scissor-like fashion, which resulted in 2 quick gusts of wind heading towards Madara. Having seen the motion, Madara jumped over the first one and landed lightly on his feet, all the while doing a quick succession of hand movements. Though he didn't get to finish whatever deadly jutsu he planned on using, as the second gust of wind hit him square in the chest and sent him flying into the small courtyard outside, landing on a pile of ornamental rock. Giving him no time to recuperate, Naruto appeared in a blur above his head and slammed his fist into the space next to his head, grazing his ear and causing the rocks to split and crack under the pressure. Before Madara could get any move in, Naruto let out a low giggle and patted him on the cheek. "I guess I win this match." "Calm down, buddy," he said lightly and once again patted him on the cheek. "Please don't freak out. Get it together." Madara only lay there, stiff as a board, face obscured by his overgrown bangs. Tired of hovering over him, Naruto released his arm from next to his head and sat down on his chest, crossing his legs and making himself comfortable. "I do hope you're not upset. It is fun sparring with you," Naruto said cheerfully and looked down at Madara's face and patted him on the chest, hoping to see a positive sign. All he could see was a slightly flushed look on what he could see of his face. The eyes and part of his nose were covered by his messy hair. "Uchiha-san?" he said a little nervously, and slowly bent down to uncover his face. Next thing he knew, he was looking into a pair of very amused eyes. "I don't think a woman should be on her back as much as I have been." Naruto though wryly, and tried to get up, only to be met by the once again boulder that is Uchiha Madara. He all of a sudden was aware that he was lying on the ground with the said boulder's legs on either side of his very female body, not to mention that once again, his clothes were in a disarray and the material of her kimono was practically around her thighs. A smirk slowly spread onto Madara's face, and with a very intense, almost scary full-out smile, he got off of her and offered her a hand, and even did his best not to look at her legs. "Take it, don't be a dick," Naruto thought to himself. This was no time to be prideful. He knew a peace offering when he saw one. Scoffing under his breath, he took the offered hand and helped himself up, letting the kimono slide down and dusting himself off. "Yes, I suppose it is fun," Madara said slyly and did a quick head shake to rearrange his hair, and what came off as sort of girly to him, but he wasn't going to say that out loud. "Do you spar often?" Naruto asked with actual interest. After a short pause, Madara answered with caution, "Yes, mostly with my brother." "A brother? Oh, how fun! I have never had a chance to spar with a sibling." Seeing a guarded look on Madara's face, Naruto figured it was a good time as any to tie himself to the Uchiha. I need to get an excuse to be with him daily, enough personal time to be an influence to him. Perhaps he might be a sparring buddy? Naruto thought with excitement. Just because he wanted to reform Madara didn't mean he had to do in some boring way. Hopefully his gender would not cause the Uchiha to decline in some sort of chauvinistic display. Hell, that's how it worked with Sasuke, he thought, trying not to become nostalgic. "But you do think we could benefit from, how you say, meeting up and training with each other? I mean, basic matches, nothing too specific," Naruto said quickly. He didn't want Madara to think he was out to steal his family's secret style or movement. God only knew how crazy Uchihas were about that sort of thing. "Perhaps. I do see the advantage. So, maybe we should do this, like every day," Naruto said, smiling, all the while lightly messing with the sleeve of the kimono and softening his eyes. "Time to use the charm." Naruto expected to see an effect on Madara, but was surprised to see an actual blush spread on his face. He took a step closer and did the head cocking thing this guy seemed to like. "Is that a yes? Though I do know the fact I am a woman might intimidate you, but please, don't let that SCA." "That would be interesting," Madara quickly said and stepped back, softly clearing his throat, clearly affected by his feminine charms. "Wow, this might be easier than I thought," Naruto thought with excitement. "But I cannot have you come in that clothing," he said, all the while give her a very slow once-over. "Or not?" Yes, I'd see how it might get in the way," Naruto said thoughtfully. "I'll have to find suitable garments. I did see a nice house a few minutes from where I met him. They might not notice a few missing shirts or shorts. Before any arrangements are made, I do have one inquiry. How does a woman such as yourself learn movements like those? What clan do you belong to? Also, what was the business you were in my territory for? I believe you have not elaborated just yet, said Madara. Once again the suspicion leaked back into his voice, and Naruto groaned inwardly. Best to get this out of the way now. Yes, you didn't exactly give me time to explain myself, he said coyly and forced out a soft laugh when he saw Madara flinch. Spotting a bench-looking thing made out of wood a few steps away, Naruto made his way towards it and sat down, hoping to buy some time to make up a cover story. Okay, let's see, I'm here for business and from my village, by myself, oh god, what else ugh? For opening a business. People were interested in that sort of thing, right? Naruto quickly scanned his brain for anything that he might have learned of the time before Konoha was actually formed. Damn it, that won't work. This was a time in which clans had exclusive camps and didn't exactly let outsiders in. Racking his brain for a plausible backstory, Naruto found one that might sound reasonable. Okay, I think I got it. I'm some rebellious daughter of some diplomat who sort of deals with ninjas, but not really, and I'm exploring the countryside before I am married off. Nice. I hope that's not too suspicious. Naruto said quietly to himself. He was never really good at lying to people, but being a ninja sort of made you hone that particular skill. Unfortunately, Naruto had a lot of work to do in this particular area, so he hoped he could play it off as well as the missions he was used to taking. After composing himself, Naruto peered over at the man that was now seated next to him and cleared his throat. You see, it all started when my father told me it was time to get married. After almost half an hour of bullshitting and answering Madara's infuriatingly specific questions, it seemed that he was satisfied with his backstory and wasn't suspicious anymore. What he had ended up with was this. On her 22nd birthday, her father had decided to drop the marriage dilemma on her. Either ascend into the political field as a representative for her family full-time, or wed one of the local and wealthy politicians. Deciding to strike out against her diplomatic father, she had refused and had threatened to renounce her name and her political positions. Seeing how she was the only heir, her father was all but mortified. In order to escape and get her way, she had bargained with him and had asked for a couple months off to let her explore the land before she had to make any sort of decision. He had conceded, of course, as long as she let an entourage be with her at all times. She had agreed and had set off to pack her things, only to leave 2 days earlier than expected by herself, and had left the group of her father's people in the dust. Madara had seemed slightly amused and mostly kept quiet except for his questions. Such as how far away was the village? About a week's walk away. How long before she had to return? A couple of months. Where did she learn those moves? Private tutors and teachers in order to protect herself from any future attempted assassinations, which seemed to pique the interest of the Uchiha. What clan did she belong to? Well, seeing as how her village only occasionally dealt with ninjas but weren't actually trained to be one themselves, there was only the rare few who took up that lifestyle, and didn't consider their family name a clan structure. And so forth, he had seen sated after a few other questions, so Naruto felt that he was in the clear. He even felt proud of himself. It usually took some briefing and about 2 days to prepare himself for undercover missions like this. But it wasn't going bad. In fact, Naruto thought it was safe to ask Madara questions about his family. I believe I have taken up a lot of time talking about myself. You have yet to contribute to this conversation. Naruto teased lightly and turned his big blue eyes at him. Well, as mentioned before, I am part of the great Uchiha clan, the strongest and most brilliant clan in all the lands. Madara said proudly, notably puffing out his chest. Really? I think I have heard of that name before, but my village does not really involve themselves with ninja clans too much, so I couldn't be too sure. There are many rumors about our family, but one cannot trust too much what they say. Those damned senjus probably spread the worst of them. The anger showed clearly in Madara's voice as he said this. Okay, so the good OL senjus aren't his best friends. Naruto noted, and in the back of his mind he sort of knew, thinking back to the Valley of the End and the catastrophe those two powerhouses had caused must have been rooted in this hate for each other. Senjus? Is that another ninja clan? Naruto asked naively. They are of no importance. To speak their name in the same breath of an Uchiha is deplorable. He then kept going on as how certain clans were strong in one area but were completely useless in others, and pretty much kept saying how Uchihas were the best. Ugh, fucking Uchihas, you are a pain in everyone's ass. Looking up at the future cause of much unwanted suffering, Naruto couldn't help but notice that Madara seemed extremely young. Sure, there were bruises here and there in what he assumed were from their earlier struggles, and there were slight bags under his eyes in what he wrote off as a restless night, but that didn't distract the youthfulness that was Madara. His skin was fair and void of any obvious wrinkles. There was a glitter to his eyes that most ninja don't keep past their mid-20s, and not to mention that at times, when he slipped from his arrogant mask, there was an animated feel about him. He can't be more than 20. He could see how women longed for this powerful and admittedly attractive man. Women always seem to dig the dark ones, well, men too, he added. Once again Naruto thought about his sexuality. If someone would have told him that a few years out of the academy he'd be sleeping with guys and not hate it, he would have farted in their face and get a couple punches in. But now he understood the complexity of human sexuality. It wasn't like he thought himself of a pervert or anything close to that, but experimenting with women and men was just so fun for Naruto. What he felt with a woman, especially during sex, was mind-blowing, and hell, it was ridiculously complicated and almost if not even more pleasurable when he was the woman. But he could also feel that way with the few men that he had been with. It wasn't all black and white with him. He chuckled slight in his mind, the QB rumbling distantly as well, commenting on how humans complicated things. Rubbing the back of his neck, he agreed, though he hadn't communicated with the fox for a while, it felt good to hear him here and there. Which brought him back to the present, and the man sitting next to him. Internally shaking himself off his observations of the young Uchiha and his own nature, Naruto focused back on what the conversation was leading to, him playing stupid. Ninja politics sound very complex, Naruto said lamely, hoping that it matched whatever Madara was talking about. Madara simply nodded firmly. Hoping to switch the conversations, Naruto was hoping to actually get into the town or village, or camp that all these Uchihas were clustered in. To say he was curious was an understatement, but he also wanted to take advantage of what it had to offer. Maybe he could find someone or something that would give him a clue as to how to switch Madara's twisted point of view. You know, as a man of a noble family, you have yet to entertain your host properly, Naruto mentioned and patted his stomach for emphasis. It had been almost 8 hours since he had eaten anything besides that bitter tea. Almost as if on strings, Madara stood up suddenly and fluidly, an almost embarrassed look on his face. He took a couple of seconds to himself, and it seemed that he was working something out. What it was Naruto was oblivious to, but a few moments later he seemed to reach a conclusion and gave a cocky smirk. My home may be grand in its own way, but it is not meant for many, or for entertaining. I do believe it is time to take you to the center of our compound. The smirk stayed on his face and his eyes glittered with what Naruto hoped was mild excitement. Are you ready to meet the rest of the Uchihas? Naruto's eyes widened and he could feel the adrenaline start pumping through his body. The Uchiha compound. No allies, no known infrastructure. This is gonna be big. Naruto thought apprehensively. He had to play this game very carefully. Though he might have put this one man at ease, there were sure to be others that just might catch on to her little facade and might even label her a spy. He sort of was, but hey, he was trying to help, honestly. But man, did he want to go see how it all started. The nervousness was there flowing throughout his body, but what followed was the eagerness to experience something that no one still alive had the chance to. Naruto had to hold himself back from grinning like crazy. What he did in turn was get up slowly, pat his kimono in place and smile softly at Madara. I do hope I am. It would be quite uncomfortable if I were to upset anyone. And with that Madara actually full out chuckled and laid his hand gently on her waist and guided her into the woods in what he assumed was their compound. Well, our clan is full of completely understanding individuals. A simple sentence, but Naruto couldn't help but shiver slightly, part of that eagerness again, part nervousness, and a whole big part of, what the fuck am I walking into? No, I don't have any other siblings. I'm an only child, you see, so when you spoke about your brother I must admit I was a bit jealous. Being the only heir to a political family is quite troublesome sometimes. It can tire you out. Naruto replied. Madara had asked a little about her family, hoping to fill in the gaps of silence on their way to the central Uchiha territory. Whether their physical closeness or the conversation, or perhaps just their charisma, Naruto could almost feel their relationship begin to morph into a more friendly one. He only snorted, an arrogant look plastered on his face. And down the drain it goes. Naruto stopped walking. He couldn't believe his ears. Did Madara actually think that she was less of a person just because she wasn't a ninja? Well, sure, maybe in this whacked out reality, he wasn't supposed to be and he technically was supposed to pretend that she was ignorant to most ninja happening. That did not give him any right to show it. Anger flowed tightly throughout his body, almost vibrating with the urge to hit him. I am a better ninja than you will ever be, you bastard. I follow my own way and I would never taunt those who are not trained the way we are, especially to those who are technically civilians. Naruto knew that his anger was a bit much and he had to control it, but he just couldn't help it. He was being nice to an asshole who has fucked up more than he ever could, and he had the gall to snort in his face. No, if I am to change him, then he better fucking know how to at least act civilized. Being an Uchiha did not mean he was better than anyone else, even if he knew they were infamous for pressuring their young and scarring their childhood. That gave Madara no right to be this rude, especially to a woman he just met. What was that? Naruto asked tartly, forcing a blank but pleasant look on her delicate features. These mini-fights were draining a lot out of him. It had been a while since he fought this often with anyone, especially over something like mannerisms and pleasantries. Madara stopped as well and simply gave her an equally blank look. Well, if blank and arrogant could go together. Something wrong? Did you hear an animal? Don't fear, Naruto-san. This land may be a bit different from yours, but I assure you that nothing you have seen would ever best me. God, just kill me now. He cannot be this egotistic. No. I am not worried over some rustling in the bushes. You offended me, whether you noticed it or not, he retorted. He couldn't hold the blank face anymore and could feel the wrinkles forming between his eyes. He assumed it must have been quite a sight on a woman's face. You mean your uncomfortable family dilemma? I do not find any problem with it. Madara replied calmly. If you are in such a position that makes you uneasy, then change it. Naruto opened his mouth to yell at him, or at least to say something, but nothing came out. Fuck, that is the smartest thing that I've heard come out of his mouth. He slowly closed his mouth and scoffed. You know what? You're right. No much how much it bothers me, you're right. Madara indulged her with an Uchiha smile and grinned at her, his eyes dark and gazing into her own. But you must at least be civil, at least be diplomatic in your reactions. No matter your birth, your rank in society, or your own delusions, people have feelings, and words can hurt. I don't want to lecture you, but everything you say has a consequence, and you can't be some child who expects to have the friends he harms to simply come back to him, because right now I am not your friend. His chest heaved, as if the speech itself physically exhausted him. He released the skirt of the kimono he just now realized was clenched in his hands. I need a break from him. In a split second, Naruto was gone, running through the large tree, stepping on branch after branch, not caring if he followed her or not. You are taking this female role too seriously. Keep your human emotions in check. Kyuubi growled, clearly annoyed. Naruto grumbled to himself, feeling like a child, and stopped on one of the stronger branches, extending his arm and leaning against the trunk. Kyuubi didn't often chastise him, not really caring one way or the other, as long as Naruto kept himself alive, so it grated his nerves at times when he did. You know, after all this time, morphing together and all, you think a better attitude towards me would be at the top of your list. Survival is at the top of my list, do not fool yourself. Naruto merely chuckled to himself. That was too true. If it wasn't for the nine-tailed fox and his last-minute pick-me-up power surges, he would be dead 100 times over by now. Yes, now that is clear, turn around, that puppeteer is heading over. Kyuubi snorted, his tails flicking in annoyance. Well, I guess even the famed nine-tailed fox hasn't gotten over being used by the big bad Uchiha. Naruto taunted. He knew all too well his hatred towards the Uchihos, not to mention how in a moment of weakness he had been used by that ignorant brat. I'll get in an extra punch or two here and there, how about it? Naruto jokingly mentioned and bit his thumb, trying to hold back his laughter. A mere punch would never suffice for making a fool of me. His mind all but shook with the anger that Kyuubi extruded. Naruto-san. He tensed, back rigid, and slowly counted to 10. He really was being overly dramatic, Naruto admitted to himself. At least I can pass it off as a rush of hormones or something like that. Naruto-san. Madara repeated. If Naruto didn't know any better, he swore he heard some remorse in his voice somewhere. Slowly turning around, he gave him the annoyed look that was all too justified. What? He really wasn't in the mood for another idiotic conversation with him. You run fast. Yeah, thanks, training, remember? Naruto replied shortly, arms crossed. He really was not in the mood for this. He gave him a hard look, scrutinizing him, waiting for another stupidity to leave his mouth. For one of the most feared ninja of all time, you are one dumb fuck. Naruto thought to himself. It's probably the age. How old was he again? Look, Naruto-san, I thought of what you mentioned, and well, I suppose that before letting him finish, Naruto blurted out what was on his mind. How old are you anyway? This made Madara stop talking and a confused look overcame his face. It was kind of funny. His cheeks were beginning to redden and it seemed that he didn't know what to do with his hands, seeing as how they were tucked into his shorts, which caused his back to hunch over a little bit. It was like a whole different person. It made him seem even younger, so insecure, so vulnerable. Totally not the man he had met earlier in the day. Weird mood swings. Too hard of a question? Naruto laughed, seeing him so weak-looking grudgingly made him feel better. Also, it made him get over his behavior earlier. Naruto could pick a fight, but he knew when to let things slide. I shall be T20 less than 4 months from today. He stammered out, trying hard to compose himself. So you're 19? Why didn't you just say so? He couldn't help but tease him. He knew this trick. It's what you did when you tried to make yourself seem older. Hell, Naruto was guilty of doing it too. Though, he usually reserved it for the wooing of older women. Well, that is how we explain our birth dates in our clan, Madara said quickly, recovering to his haughty self. Aha, totally got me there. Naruto internally rolled his eyes. Okay, well then, when will we be arriving at your compound? If you haven't forgotten, I require some sustenance, and smiled. He didn't know if his speech was over the top and too dated, but so far Madara hadn't mentioned yet. Madara actually chuckled. You are actually at the borders of it right now. Naruto's eyes widened. A zip of excitement once again ran through his body. After almost half an hour of walking/fighting/running, Naruto stared into what he assumed was the direction of their destination and closed his eyes, concentrating. He could hear muffled noises. Perking up, he flicked his eyes quickly throughout the whole foliage, hoping to catch a glimpse of the noises that sounded all too familiar, the hustle and bustle of a town, or in this case, the compound. We're here! He thought excitingly. He could feel it. Hell, he could almost taste it. The air even had a different aura to it. The Uchiha compound. Grab my hand, Madara said quickly, not looking at her. What's with the shy guy routine? Naruto thought, if he didn't know any better. Please, Naruto-san. Madara stressed. Naruto stared at the offered hand. Well, you did say please. He laid his hand over the other, and with only a quick chakra pulse for warning, they disappeared. Next thing he knew, Naruto was staring into a full-blown district. People who all seemed vaguely familiar walked to and fro, animals ran by with giggling children following soon after, and random snippets of conversation filtered through the bustle. Yes, have you heard raising the market value for? Oh dear, high enough as is. Isn't that Madara-sama? Oh. It is, he's looking well. Maybe she? What lovely hair, foreigner perhaps. Mama. Look pretty lady with. Lord, her clothing unkempt. And so on and so forth, tuning them out he took in everything else. Focusing on the scenery, he noticed that in a way, it looked like a mini Konoha, well sans the 100-year-old beasts he was used to seeing. The trees had been evidently cut down to form a dirt road leading to what he assumed was the center of their clan's village. Houses lined the road, some big and some small, but all with some form of the Uchiha symbol here and there. What astonished him more than anything, though, was how normal everything seemed. For some reason, he had expected a desolate village with run-down houses and trash littering the streets. He had not expected this, a town full of life, full of all ages of people, and he especially did not expect to see the all-too-familiar signs of businesses. He did not anticipate something so modern. Well, at least they didn't have neon signs or anything of the sort. Then he didn't know how he'd react. Wow. Was all that he could muster. Well, I'll be damned. Madara turned and looked at her, the confident young man once again, arms crossed and smiling cockily, and said, Our clan prides itself in maintaining a healthy and thriving compound. That you have noticed this is no hard task. Now, for your meal, an acquaintance of mine owns the barbecue pit just a few blocks down. This way, and without further ado started walking down the main road, nodding to a select few here and there. Keeping pace next to him, he took in his surroundings once again. Now that Naruto took a closer look at the clusters of people here and there, he noticed they all were staring. It didn't bother him, seeing as how he was raised around hateful eyes and lingering stares, but this was different. The eyes weren't hateful or mean, but full of curiosity and contained wonderment. It was just a peculiar feeling was all. Thinking about his appearance, he must have stood out like a sore thumb. Long golden hair, shining brightly compared to the ebony locks of the Uchihas. Tan skin due to his intensive outdoor training compared to that of fair skin. Cornflower blue eyes instead of the deep and almost soulless black of those that surrounded him. This female body was practically the complete opposite of what embodied an Uchiha. It was almost funny. Oh, looks like I'm a little taller too. He hadn't realized his 5 feet 6 inches was too tall, but compared to the women he saw from his standpoint, they all were around 5 or 5 feet 1 inch. Glancing at Madara, he noticed he was barely 2 inches if even above her head. Mistaking the glances as nervousness, Madara said, A few more steps and we'll be away from the curious glances. It was almost nice, but Naruto could only scoff. You're pretty short for some clan heir, you know that. Madara could only clench his teeth. How could this woman fluster him so much? She had loosened up since the few hours they had been together, but he wasn't sure he liked it too much. She was harsh and demanding at times. It was confusing. He even put his pride aside and made sure to make her feel comfortable, but then she would snap back at him, as if offended by his care. He didn't know whether all women from her village were like this, or perhaps it was the fact that she was held in a tight spot due to her political affiliation, but it irked him. Once again, he thought of his humble and gentle mother, or his dutiful and stoic cousins. They were nothing like her. She was more dominant than any woman he'd ever encountered. She was almost as crass as some of his male relatives, especially so when she teased him about his age or his height. A man such as I shouldn't be cowed by a female. Yet, even with all these marks against her, he couldn't help but feel drawn to her. He thought back to what he said about wanting to get to know her. That was true, and growing stronger by the minute. She fought when others apologized profusely, she laughed when others blushed in embarrassment. It was refreshing to interact with someone so complex. Madara sighed, he hadn't met someone this interesting in a while, and it was disappointing. He knew her time here was limited, but perhaps that was the way it should be. No female should take up as much time as she had so far. The most he ever spent with a strange woman was a few hours, never a whole day. Stealing a quick glance, he noticed her obvious staring and couldn't help but preen with a bit of pride. The sort of pride that a man got when he was standing next to a beautiful woman, and was glad that she was accompanying him. He knew it was a bit arrogant, but he was an Uchiha, and they deserved the best. Of course, he would try his best to hide these internal thoughts, for he had an inkling of an idea that if this exotic woman ever found out about them, she would be sure to physically leave a reminder of her nonconformist behavior. Looking back out to his birthplace, he noticed the looks of his close relatives and their neighbors. The looks on a few of his close family members were mostly questioning. He knew he'd have to explain later, something he wasn't too sure how to feel. The rest were from those that were not directly related to the Uchihas or even connected at all. Though most of the compound was made up of Uchiha men and women, a very low percentage included those allowed to stay for trade and business reasons. It had caused a few relationships and marriages within the family and the merchant outsiders, a fact that was not very well accepted within the clan, but truces were made and deals were done so that these families were protected. How someone would deliberately ostracize themselves from their family, Madara could not understand. Once again, his eyes wandered towards the vixen next to him. When she had grasped his hand, he grudgingly admitted that his pulse had sped up during their contact. To her it must have been nothing, a mere touch of a boy's hands, but for a second, he had felt something. It was not a something that could be written off as hormones, but that was a factor too, but he had physically felt a spark of power jump along his skin. His eyes had widened a fraction of an inch, but he had whisked them away before he thought too much about it. He had deliberately done so that she could not remember or see the paths in which he transported through. If he remembered correctly, there were approximately 12 illusions he had passed in order to reach the Uchiha territory. It was never too safe with outsiders, no matter how charming. Naruto hadn't even questioned it though. It nagged something at the back of his brain. How could someone not involved with ninjas not bother to question such a technique? It worried him. Maybe he needed to interrogate her a bit more. Perhaps she has been exposed to ninja dealings more than she is aware. Pushing it all into a corner of his mind, he would save it for a later time where he could focus more. Smelling the familiar scents of the establishment, he stopped and announced their arrival. "We are here." Looking to the left, Naruto saw what seemed like a pretty generic barbecue joint. Some things never change. Both walking in, they were greeted by a cheerful middle-aged man, with a slightly wavering voice. "Is he scared?" "Madara-sama. Welcome. Please sit, what may I get for you?" The man tried to say as cheerfully as possible, a nervous flicker of his eyes. No answer. "You have quite a female companion there, quite a beautiful. May I ask how you two came to know each other?" Madara cleared his throat, and even that sounded high and mighty. Sensing that he might say something stupid, Naruto interrupted. "Hello, you may call me Naruto. It's a pleasure to meet you. I must admit I am quite excited to taste your food," Naruto said, avoiding the latter question, trying to be as carefree as possible to put the man at ease. The pleasure is all mine, Naruto-san. I am Kohei." Then bowed deeply and gestured towards his restaurant. "A friend of Madara-sama's is a friend of ours. Please sit wherever you'd like." "Well, I wouldn't say that," Naruto whispered under his breath, knowing full well that Madara had heard him. What he did externally was nod happily to the older gentleman and went to the third booth down, closer to the back, in which he assumed the kitchen was located. Sitting down, Madara followed soon after, back straight and chin uplifted, embracing what Naruto assumed was his normal behavior. Naruto took a look around at the place and realized it still had that unused feel to it. The booths and tables all were in great condition, with no sign of wear or tear. There was only another couple of people at the other end of the establishment, but for customers that was it. Haven't made a name for themselves yet, I suppose. What greatly influenced this thought was how some of the deals he could see laying on tables and what he glimpsed before going into the store were ridiculously cheap. Many deals of group meals and discounts for certain times of the year were what caught his eye. I'll have to snatch some of those before I leave. "Have you been in this business for long, Kohei-san?" Naruto asked after his observations. "Oh my, is it that obvious?" "And not quite. I opened for business a mere 2 months ago," he answered timidly, eyes downcast and apologetic. "If it weren't for Madara-sama's patronage, we would have gone out as soon as we opened. You see, barbecue is not very common in these parts, it's very foreign. Really? Well, what a kind person Madara-sama must be, he said cheekily, turning to look at said person. All Madara did was snort and retorted HN. You Uchihas, never taking a compliment well. As if not noting her sarcasm, Kohei nodded enthusiastically and agreed wholeheartedly. What may I get for you? He said, mostly looking at Madara. The usual. As if expecting this, the man bowed deeply and shuffled off into the back. Pans clattering and the muted yelling of people indicated that it was a rush order. Naruto laughed and leaned forward, forming a bridge with his hands and laid his chin on them, focusing on the man in front of him. I didn't know you were such a charitable man, Madara-san. It is nothing you should hide. He smiled condescendingly at him, hoping to rile him up a bit. It worked like a charm as Madara shifted slightly in his seat, flicking his bangs out his eyes. The food is acceptable, therefore I eat here on occasion. Speaking of which, what is he preparing? Like I said earlier, the usual. Madara replied smartly. Naruto raised an eyebrow. And what, pray tell, is your usual? How do you like it, Madara-san? He said, voice as composed as possible, and with a growing grin on his face. Madara's mouth opened slightly, his eyes widening, hands gripping the table. This is too easy, Naruto thought with glee. I guess no woman had never actually been this obvious to him. Well, that's a good sign, I suppose. At least they have some self-respect. Naruto was having fun. Using pickup techniques decades ahead of someone's time must be like a hammer to the head. Then, 2 plates of sizzling barbecue ribs were placed in front of them, visibly making the Uchiha flinch, clearly unaware of his surroundings. TSK, rookie. Where did the trained assassin from earlier go? Your order, Madara-sama, Naruto-san, Kohei said after placing the food and a pitcher of water in the middle of the table, clearly in better spirits. Finally, food! Giving Kohei an appreciative smile, he picked up one of the ribs and started to eat as daintily as possible, but with the fervor of his ramen eating skills, it was no easy task. Not really focusing on Madara, Naruto decided to ditch the small talk and feed himself. After a little more than 20 minutes, Naruto had finished his 3rd plate of ribs. Surprisingly, he hadn't gotten his hands or clothes too dirty. The only sign of his less than mannered eating habits was a small stain on the sleeve of his kimono. Success. Looking up, he caught Madara's glance. He was met with an incredulous stare. He grinned. The Uchiha had only just finished his last rib of the first plate. Naruto exclaimed and scratched the back of his neck. I don't know why no one comes here, this food is delicious. Madara only kept staring, this time with more composed features. Shrugging his shoulders, Naruto began to scoot out of the booth, hoping to pay for his meal. Finally out, Naruto stood up and began walking towards the back of the restaurant, where he saw a small counter located. Scanning the room, the 2 other guests were still finishing up their meal, caught in some deep discussion. He wanted to pay for the food, the only problem that he was currently trying to figure out was how the money looked. The only image he had in his mind was decades too soon, and he didn't think the shopkeeper would be too happy with receiving money he didn't recognize. Taking a closer look at the other customers, he noticed a few coins piled on the corner of the table. Score! Naruto thought, now all I gotta do is get close enough without looking too suspicious to see them in more detail. Objective acquired, he started walking once again once he realized he had been standing still. His goal was never achieved. Just as he was passing Madara, the Sharingan master's hand shot out and grabbed his wrist. Wow, fast. Naruto had only caught a blur of movement which now registered as Madara's grip on him. Looking down at the restrained appendage, he gave a quick tug. He didn't budge. Uchiha-san, please release my wrist, I intend to pay for my meal, Naruto said lightly, giving a couple other tugs. Sure enough, his wrist was still in the lock of Madara's hold. Looking at him, he noticed that he was doing the Uchiha smile once again. Glad I can be so fucking entertaining. Naruto could have ripped away from him, but that meant another fight and another confrontation. He really didn't think he could be so nice anymore and only retained his corrective instincts to yelling and light sparring. Without any word, Madara stood up and slapped several coins on the table. Giving him a look that said, "There, you happy?" he scooted out gracefully somehow and marched towards the exit, hands still around Naruto's wrist. Doing the only thing possible without looking clumsy, Naruto sped up and was obliged to walk behind Madara in order to prevent from tripping himself. Letting out a frustrated sigh, he yelled back into the restaurant, "Thank you, Kohei-san," and then was forced out into the main road again and headed up the street into the center of the compound. "Let go of me, Uchiha-san. You are not being very courteous right now," he said, voice high and sing-songy. Madara only clicked his teeth and tightened his grip on her. Growling slightly, Naruto matched the Uchiha's pace and started tugging more viciously. "Let me go," he hissed, voice low but getting serious. He didn't want to cause a scene in front of prospective acquaintances, but this was really getting on his nerves. Madara didn't even flinch and kept on walking, getting closer and closer to a large estate that Naruto could make out the silhouette to. It's getting late, what is it? Like 8 already? Naruto guesstimated by the position of the shadows and the fewer people walking around. There were more teenagers than anything now, surely hoping to break curfew or screw around, whatever teens did in this age. Adolescents, they never change. He thought, noting how a few of them gave quick appreciative glances, and there were even a few double takes. I really need to check myself out. Naruto thought jokingly, he hadn't really studied himself ever since he was dropped off in this reality. The only things he knew were the ones he could feel and see within his sight range, such as her mid-waist blonde hair, which was currently loose, the height noted earlier, the Urhem size which was about the same as his Oryoku no Jutsu, meaning large. Other than that, he didn't know the facial features, which he assumed were at least pretty gauging by everyone's reactions. Lifting his constrained hand up, he decided to play a little prank on him. Making up his mind, he decided to make the Uchiha uncomfortable and out of his element. What was on Naruto's mind was to give him a long lick on the knuckles. He giggled, "Oh man, this is gonna be hilarious." A date had done it to him on the night they were sure to have sex. It had given him an instant boner. It made him wonder how Madara would react to it. Lifting up his hand, he neared it to his mouth, tongue at the ready. Sensing the movement and hearing the giggle, Madara slowly turned his head to the side, looking down at their raised hands. It felt like Naruto had all the time in the world. He took in Madara's blank face slowly morphing into a shocked one, their raised hands and the ever-darkening sky. It seemed like everything was moving in slow motion, milliseconds of film slowly being manipulated so that he could focus on the scene he was soon to cause havoc on. Almost to his mouth, Naruto slowly stuck his tongue out, preparing to land a big wet one, but before anything could actually happen, a voice startled them. "Madara-san. You're home. We didn't expect you for another 3 days." A very cheerful tone rang out from the door of the nearest house. Visibly flinching, Madara quickly let go of her wrist as if on fire for being caught in the act and did an about-face, nodding at the disembodied voice, almost as if they weren't in a compromising position a few seconds ago. "Impressive. I don't think I could have recovered that quickly." "Yes, matters came up." Naruto pouted slightly and crossed his arms. He hated when pranks didn't go his way. Shrugging to himself, Naruto observed the interactions between the two. It seemed they were on a friendly basis. "Madara-san, huh? I wonder who it could be." Stepping to the side to check out the voice, it turned out to be a young teenager, around the age of 17. He had the trademark dark hair that so many villagers had, but he was incredibly tall, even taller than Madara. He approximated 6 feet 5 inches, nearing the house. Seeing as how Madara had totally forgotten about his existence, and just walked over to him, he noticed one another different characteristics. It was dark outside, but he could just make out the color of his eyes. They were a deep green. "So I'm guessing he's not a straight-up Uchiha then." Their conversation went on for a while longer, something concerning trade and the market fluctuations. Naruto sighed. "So is he just going to ignore me?" he said to himself. Perhaps it was someone Madara didn't want Naruto to know about, or vice versa. "Well, I'm going to introduce myself." Marching over, he was 2 steps away from the house, noting how it was a traditional home, more decorative than some of the surrounding ones. "Must be rich," he deduced. Taking the last step to stand behind Madara, he tapped his shoulder and smiled when he turned around. Not giving him time to speak, he pushed him to the side, with a little more force than necessary, causing him to catch his footing, and looked up at the young man now before her. The young boy gave her a confused smile, eyes uneasy and flicking to Madara's as if asking for permission. Naruto began his introduction. "Hello there. It seems Uchiha-san has forgotten his manners once again and forgot to introduce us. My name is Naruto. I'm new around this territory. What may your name be?" He then jutted his right hand out, and gave a friendly smile. The teenage boy slowly raised his hand and met the woman's hand in a handshake, a very weak one, but a handshake nonetheless. "My name is Naoki, good to meet you," he said softly, hanging his head and moving it so that his bangs fell onto his face. "Does no one know a good haircut around here?" Naruto had noticed a lot of the men had long hair, or overgrown bangs. He supposed it must be the current fad. Noting the silence, he thought it was weird to see the change in character. He seemed nothing like how he had enthusiastically been to catch Madara's attention. Though his head was bent, that didn't change Naoki's height, so Naruto simply tilted his head and looked under all the hair and stared up at him. "Naoki-san, are you okay?" Said person only flinched and shuffled backwards, heading to the now closed door. His hand came out behind him grasping for the doorknob, but due to his height it was a ways down. Bending backwards and to the side, he finally got it to turn and successfully opened the door, but on his way back he somehow slipped and ended up falling on his rear end. Naruto couldn't help it, it was too funny. He couldn't not laugh, so he did just that. He threw his head back, causing his hair to follow in an arc behind it, and laughed until tears started to form at the corner of his eyes. He clenched his stomach and bent forward, still laughing, hair now around his face because he was now facing the ground. "Ahaha, oh man, ahaha, Naoki-san, forgive me, but that was just too amusing," Naruto finally said, after wiping his tears away and straightening up, staring down at the splayed teenager before him. It seemed Naoki hadn't moved, he was still on the floor with his hands bracing the ground to balance his weight. One leg was also bent, while the other was extended. Naoki only looked up and he gave Naruto a wide-eyed stare, mouth slightly puckered. "I do apologize, I didn't know I was that scary," Naruto kidded, but Naoki only stared at her and didn't answer. Sorry?" Finally Naoki spoke, looking at Madara. "She thinks I'm funny?" It was Madara's turn to sigh and give her a frustrated look. Bending down, he helped to get Naoki back on his feet, then stepped back and turned to Naruto, voice serious. "Naoki-san has a rare phobia." Madara paused, then looked at Naoki, who was now fiddling with his thumbs, looking up once in a while to look at Naruto, muttering something under his breath. "He is afraid of women." Well, perhaps afraid or phobia are not the correct terms, but he does not function well around females. It is hard for him to interact successfully with them. Naruto could only stare, mouth shaped in a little O. "It is getting late, perhaps I should delay the introductions," Madara said more to himself, in the thinker pose. A few short seconds later he nodded to himself, and turned to speak to Naoki. "You must be tired, Naoki, go to bed, we'll discuss this later tomorrow." He emphasized this by pushing him into the house and slowly shutting the door. Just before he closed the door completely, Naoki repeated what he was saying under his breath, "She thinks I'm funny." Then gave a big grin, waved at her, and the door was shut. Now Madara turned to Naruto. "I was going to take you on a tour of my family's grand estates, but it is now too late for such a thing. You will have to wait one more torturous day, Naruto-san." Naruto could only pout. That sucks." Madara only nodded. "If you would like, we can meet by the restaurant we dined at earlier. Perhaps then we can discuss our sparring schedule and begin the touring of the estates and city. You should be glad, I am not usually some guide." Without waiting for him to object, he gave a polite head shake in her direction and walked off. "But where am I supposed to sleep?" "Okay, now to find a place to sleep," Naruto deduced and started on his way to find a suitable place to stay for the night, which would most likely end up being some sort of vegetation such as the common tree. He was used to camping out under the trees Konoha provided. Hell, as a ninja of this land he was almost expected to, but he hadn't exactly thought that he would be doing that sort of dozing tonight. It felt out of place, as if this foreign time should not have factors connecting him to his future location. Quickly shaking that train of thought, he directed his attention back to finding a camp. Naruto decided to find it by relying on fate, the random method. He chuckled, it was what he did when he felt particularly adventurous or didn't exactly want to waste so much time on trial and errors. He closed his eyes and spun around quickly. Once he had spun several times, he stopped and pointed in front of him. Opening his eyes, he followed his arm and looked to where his index finger had decided to take him. He noticed it was slightly to the left of the main Uchiha compound. Shrugging to himself, he took a quick look around to make sure there were no spectators, then flexed his clenched muscles and jumped onto the nearest roof. Naruto smiled. It had felt like forever since he had gone roof hopping. Though he knew that this basic ninja skill was known to all across the land, it was one of his favorite hobbies. As a kid he had done just that, with a few pranks tied here and there to make it productive, but he had started early nonetheless. Sighing happily, he let himself feel the wind playing with his long hair, and focused on the minute thump that could be barely heard if he focused hard enough. The adrenaline rush that it gave him made him speed up slightly. Even though he had no specific destination just yet, it was a great feeling pushing himself. The whole of it all was almost too much. "I miss Konoha," he thought sadly. Naruto had been in this world for less than 2 days, but it suddenly felt like an eternity with the absence of his friends and colleagues. Without the reassuring buzz of all those familiar chakra signatures surrounding him, without stopping by at his favorite eating joint, and without the hope of ever experiencing that again. It was downright depressing. Caught in his pondering, the scroll came up in the forefront of his memory. It caused Naruto to shiver and rub down the hairs on the back of his neck. A snippet of the scroll whispered through his mind. "For the hero who's done it all, a man will surely fall. Dreams and worlds can collide, but only those who travel are able to decide what lines are crossed and what lines are finished. Repeat these lines and you shall wish it." Coming back to himself, Naruto had to once again focus on the world he landed in. Stupid scroll label. Stupid me. Stupid. Stupid. He chastised himself. He knew that his erroneous reading had finally screwed him over. Thinking of the scroll again caused goosebumps to pop up over his body. Stop. He didn't feel like reliving that memory or flashback at the moment. It would be too unpleasant. Do not be weak. Kyubi grumbled in his mind, but Naruto chose to ignore him at the moment. Wouldn't be too smart to cause him to be angry and sad at the same time. Such strong emotions had to be dealt with one at a time. Kyubi's little advice did affect Naruto though. He knew he had to sit down and think these possibilities over and find a way to get back. Naruto just couldn't deal with it too seriously. For some reason, he still felt this was a joke, even though his mind and body said otherwise. If he hadn't already tried every dispelling illusion trick in the book, he'd be half dead lying in a creek somewhere. Need to find a place, he reminded himself. Spotting one of the tallest trees that he had seen so far, Naruto made his way over to it and assessed its sturdiness. Looks good, he decided and proceeded to climb his way up. After a few seconds he finally reached a branch that was suitable for his weight and settled down. Scooting as close to the base of the tree as he could, he let himself relax and observe the tranquil compound below. Looks like a mini-town, Uchiha Town HM, Naruto thought aloud. It could have been a possible name if it weren't for its integration. Nah, sounds lame. He concluded. Even Naruto didn't think an Uchiha would directly put their name for a city. It was too obvious. Letting the landscape fill his vision, he took in the simple beauty of it. It was quite a sight seeing the land be illuminated by the swollen moon in the sky. It let him see how this quaint village was laid out. It was mostly a cluster of homes, the exception being the main Uchiha compound taking up most of area. The smaller homes were closely knit so that there were rare few empty spots. There were 4 main roads, 2 of which he had seen with Madara, while the rest were little alleys that crisscrossed the rest of the compound. The houses and buildings slowly thinned out to more demure shacks, and lastly the trees made up the rest of the land for miles around. If he had to guess, it would be on the outskirts of the modern-day Konoha. It made him realize how huge Konohakagure had grown. I wonder how it all happened exactly. Naruto knew a few facts, but he wasn't too keen on the details. Yawning, he scuttled slightly and rubbed his eyes tenderly. He just realized how tired he was. The rustling of the leaves and the subtle animals' noises were slowly lulling him to sleep. With every heavy blink of his lids, his vision became more and more blurry. Fewer and fewer objects were registering in his mind. Only the dim light of the moon shining on his body let him know he was still awake. One blink, then 2, and Naruto was asleep. 00000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000 ready for a fight. Though it was all in vain because his commotion caused him to hit his head on an overhanging branch. Ow! He protested, and looked down at his feet, feeling a strange sensation. A couple birds had been pecking at his toes, clearly agitated. One of them was still going at it, ignoring his rapid movements and cries. Huh! Looking up, he saw the cause of their agitation. He had slept under the tree in which he assumed was their bird's nest. Looking closely, he saw 4 little beige eggs nestled in the center. Well, it's not like I'm gonna eat them, Naruto thought crossly. Jumping down a few branches, the birds seemed satisfied and quickly returned to their awaiting children. Annoyed, Naruto harumphed and did his regular stretching routine. After a few satisfying cracks and pops, he sighed contentedly and rubbed the sleep out of his eyes. With a few quick blinks of his eyes, he looked down on his temporary village. It was still a small shock to see it though. It was something he would have to get used to. Naruto shook his head and jumped down to the ground below, his kimono fluttering slightly on his descent. Looking down at his attire, he whistled in awe. It was dirtier than a week's old laundry. He guessed some of the birds had something to do with it. A lady shouldn't be seen like this, he thought with amusement. I should change, don't want to cause a ruckus. Naruto laughed and looked around. Who's going to see me anyway? Wait. Madara. He had forgotten his meeting with him at the restaurant. Quickly deducing the time, it seemed like it was around 10 in the morning. Hopefully he wouldn't be too late. Well, it technically still is morning, no harm done, he said to himself, trying to clear his conscience. After a few more reassuring thoughts, he settled down and fixated his gaze on his attire. Focusing on his garments, he transformed into a kimono that was actually clean. It was one of the more common ones he used on his female missions. The kimono was a light pink with a subtle white hexagon pattern running across the shoulder and bottom. He had noticed the women didn't exactly wear such fancy kimonos, usually skirts and some type of blouse, but Naruto decided he'd catch up with the fashion later. This will do nicely, besides, it won't hurt to look nice now that I might be late, he said to no one in particular, and headed towards their arranged destination. Running his hands through his hair, he worked out most of the knots he found and patted down the raised bumps he felt. Walking and fixing his hair took up a lot of time, for before he knew it, he was a few steps away from the barbecue joint. Naruto wondered how his face was, figuring it had to be presentable, for he hadn't received too many scornful looks. He assumed he was decent. With a straightening of his delicate shoulder, he made his way into the restaurant, a smile at the ready. No one was there to receive his smile though, as once again, the establishment only had one other patron, who was on the vestiges of falling asleep on his food. Blowing the bangs out of his face, he sat on the nearest table facing the street. Settling himself in, he scanned what he could see of the crowded road before him. I don't think he's been here yet, he thought optimistically. Only one way to find out, he whispered as he heard the quick shuffling steps of what he assumed were Kohei's. Naruto-san. A pleasure to see you again. How are you this fine morning? Kohei said with gusto, clearly a morning person. Naruto smiled and squinted up at him. The morning light was high now and was shining directly in his eyes. I'm great, Kohei-san, thank you, Naruto said with matched enthusiasm. This seemed to cheer the man even more as he asked loudly what he would like to eat. Well, you see, Kohei-san, I'm actually waiting for Madara-san. He and I had a meeting of sorts, Naruto said cheerfully, hoping to all the forces out there that he hadn't come and gone. Don't want to give him anything else to complain about. To his horror, a look of pity overcame the middle-aged man's face. Shit. Well, you see, Madara-san has already visited us. At the tea time, I thought it was strange seeing as he sat there for 2 hours only drinking tea. I was clearly agitated. I thought we had done something to upset him. For he didn't speak to us, only to ask for refills. We thought he was clearly dehydrated. I cannot believe any normal PP person could drink that much tea without using the bathroom. I am so glad. Oh, but I am sorry for this mix-up. You see, it is not that I am. Kohei went on and on, speech becoming more and more jumbled. It seemed he was relieved that he was still in Madara's good graces, but upset for her at the same time. His conflicting emotions were getting on his nerves. It's not like I'm going to chastise him for something I messed up on, Naruto thought tartly. Getting up slowly, Naruto rubbed the area between his brows, trying to get rid of the growing furrows there. Stepping to the side, he made his way to the exit, Kohei following behind with his apologetic words. Turning around quickly, Kohei gasped softly, surprised by his speed. It is fine, Kohei-san, do not worry, it was but a frivolous matter we were going to discuss. Now, is there a chance you knew where he might have been headed, or perhaps the direction he took off in? Naruto said, and slowly and calmly as he could. It wouldn't do to distress him even more. Kohei only shook his head and played with his hands. He was there 1 second and gone the next. And ninja can be quite quiet, I mean very silent. Stealthy. Yes, I understand. No worries. I'll be on my way, goodbye, Naruto said shortly, then walked out and escaped the shouted apologies behind him. Clicking his tongue peeved, Naruto figured he might as well try to look for the Uchiha. It would double as a recon mission to experience the layout of the compound a bit more, a 2 birds 1 stone type of deal. This might take a while. Inhaling deeply, he joined the crowd and tried to blend in, which would have been easier were it not for his bright hair and colorful kimono. As he thought earlier, most of the citizens of this village commonly wore muted clothing, nothing too pigmented, usually in shades of brown, blue or gray. Man, where's the color? Getting back to his self-appointed task, he closed his eyes and sent out a chakra pulse of his own, quickly scanning the surrounding area. It was how he had learned to sense chakras that weren't directly close to him, or disguised. Moving with the crowd, he awaited the return of anything that might be Madara's signature, a signature which he had pegged as a very active one. It was one that buzzed and hummed with restrained power, one that expanded and flexed with bursts of ninjutsu. It felt as arrogant as the source itself. Every person had their own unique feel. Ninjas had a more memorable and notable one, but civilians had a faint pulse as well. As for Naruto's, he could not exactly describe his own seeing as he was so used to it, but according to his comrades, his signature was a loud vibrating thing that pricked at the skin, sometimes on the uncomfortable side. Especially so, his team had mentioned, when he used a powerful technique, comparing it to being burned but having nothing to douse the flames with. Naruto would say more bubbly, but he wasn't exactly a good judge on pain. His tolerance was a bit higher than the rest. After a few minutes, he had only received the regular ninja spark, but none from Madara himself. This Uchiha clan has many trained members, he duly noted, sensing more than 30 moderately strong signatures. Continuing on his search, he sighed with exasperation. Where is he? Naruto stared into the gentle stoic faces around him, searching for a sign that they might give away. As expected, he only saw confused flicks of the eyes and a couple winks, but no hints as to where Madara could be. Growling to himself, he carried forwards and awaited some good news. More than an hour later, Naruto was still out of luck. When he had submitted himself to this task, he had expected a 10-minute search perhaps, but not this mindless wandering. Who would have thought you could hide a powerhouse of an Uchiha in such a small village? Naruto could have sworn he had felt his signature spike twice, but before he could take off in the direction, it would scatter then disappear altogether. It had caused a few of the villagers to stare in baffled manner to see a woman in a bright kimono run in one direction, then switch and practically sprint in the next. It's like he doesn't want to be found. Naruto thought, exasperated, then slumped and dredged on. I need to stay positive, he whined to himself, and blew the bangs out of his face. Stupid hair, he yelled irritably. The breeze had been picking up and had become quite an annoyance, causing his long locks to flutter and spread all around his head. The hair would stick in his mouth and poke his eyes. It was extremely troublesome. A haircut perhaps? Naruto thought jokingly. He wouldn't mess with his appearance too much just yet. If he figured things out just right, he might get out of here sooner than expected. Madara would be cured, he'd be a miracle worker, then everyone would go on their merry way. Might as well go find a mirror. Naruto then added another mission to his to-do list and carried on. 0000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000 and that damned woman had not appeared. Powerful clan members. He had showed up at the restaurant, and that damned woman had not appeared. To think he sat there for 2 hours awaiting her arrival. It grated on his nerves. In the back of his mind he considered that they had not exactly set a specific time, and she might have shown up later, but that only caused him to feel like fidgeting even more. It would mean she would be the one waiting for him, as it should be of course, but he also did not want to aggravate her any more than he did on his own. Perhaps Kohei-san could entertain her until he got out of this pointless meeting. He tried not to scoff, as if Kohei-san could be that interesting. Naruto-san would never be distracted by him. Madara thought childishly, but internally stopped that thought from developing and focused back on the mission discussion. Now, on to the last of the list, we need to discuss the Yamada mission. In order for us to produce a substantial amount of money from this family, I believe we should raise its difficulty ranking. They have the funds and are in desperate need of its execution. Its initial labeling was a bit too underrated, said a large tan man with shortly cropped dark hair whose voice echoed against the surrounding walls. His shirt was high-collared, pristine white and cut off at the forearms, an Uchiha fan clearly stitched on his right arm. As for the rest of his attire, one could not see considering the table that dissected all who sat. Madara considered this imposing man, though he would never say it out loud, he was an intimidating person. Over the years he had grown used to his loud manner of speech and slightly unrefined ways, but that did not distract the brutal look of him. The scars that decorated his neck and hands might have possibly added to his image. It was hard to say that he was an Uchiha, with his completely unorthodox manner of speaking and dark skin, but he had one of the deepest family lines in the whole compound. The urgency of this mission was considered due to its unprecedented request, but there are many other factors. It was underrated, as you say, because of the lack of skill required and the close range of it all. Madara replied stoically. It would not do to show discomfort of any sort, especially with this group of people. If we were to raise its ranking, the Yamada family would suspect of some conspiring in our part. They may be wealthy, but they are not stupid. They have dealt with other ninja clans before, Ryota. A few murmurs were heard amongst the men gathered. There were only 8 total, granted, but even one voice could make a difference in these dealings. Dealings that at times Madara resented. He was a possible future leader of this clan, but that did not mean that all the going-ons and responsibilities of an heir were exciting or pleasant to handle. Ryota's face gave nothing away, only a slight considering nod. That could be a problem, was all he said, looking out onto the rest of the clan members to see any other suggestions. These members who were of course all Uchiha, and all had a special part in the consideration of mission. Madara tried not to smirk, he knew most were thinking it but did not want to say it aloud. They were not exactly afraid per se, but at times choice words and phrases set the room on edge, and even though there were strict rules to keep resentment and other such emotion in check, they tended to trickle out into the casual world. What could be done perhaps, is to complete this mission as intended. Then to bind them to us, we could ask for a reserved favor, because of its urgency and situation. They would not be able to refuse, the Yamada family is known for its strong connections, said a soft but steady voice among the gathering. Madara looked in front of him, at the man whose subtle smile made him smirk in return. A silence overcame the room, as if the answer was so simple it was stupid not to have thought of in the first place. The rest of the committee agreed softly and nodded and supported. Well, I believe we have found our answer, Ryota said gladly, gave a couple knocks on the table and wrote something down on the scrolls before him. If there are no other topics, I entertain a motion to close this meeting. I motion. I second. This meeting is now closed, thank you for your times. Goodbye. Boomed Ryota and smiled, almost instantly changing his whole visage. A man who looked intimidating now looked like a glad man who was genuine and looked almost non-threatening. At once all the men stood up from the table and began to gather their things. Soft side conversations happened between a couple of the men while others simply walked out. Ryota gave another farewell and also exited, mentioning something about grabbing something to eat. Madara walked over to the only seated member, who seemed to be scribbling quickly on the scroll before him. Standing next to the pale, ponytailed man, Madara punched his shoulder. You impress me with your simplicity. I suppose you win this round, he said jokingly, a grin forming on his face. The man simply put down his brush and looked up at him. Of course I win, and I will win many more in the future, not just with words. Stop being so petty, brother. Madara could only chuckle and aim a punch at him once again. The man avoided his punch and gave a quick jab to his ribs. Your jabbing technique are getting annoying, Izuna. I do what I can, brother, I do what I can. Izuna then laughed, and they both retreated from the room. Leaving the conference room, Izuna was laughing at something Madara was explaining when he gave his brother a knowing look. I have a question for you, Madara, Izuna said suspiciously, eyes shielded and casting slight shadows on his face. This caused Madara to tense slightly. He knew it was coming, but he had not hoped to discuss it so early. What was the cause of your early return? Was the countryside not as relaxing as you hoped it would be? Or perhaps it has to do with a certain person? Izuna said, the humor clear in his voice. Madara could only grin guiltily. It was hard to hide much from his brother. They had a relationship where they could discuss mostly anything, and beat each other up in the process. But at times it felt that Izuna was the more mature one. It was mostly because he reminded him of his father so much. I might have been distracted by someone, yes, Madara said cautiously, slowly coming to a stop near the edge of the building. They were now outside the central delegation building that made up part of the main Uchiha compound. Usually he only came here twice a week to discuss and overview the missions and negations between other clans and lands. But his early arrival had caused him to be pulled into another meeting. His father should be proud. Well, I do hope to meet her, Izuna said with a smile and continued on, hands clasped and back straight as always. He knows about Naruto-san, Madara thought with panic. He knew not staying the whole time at his lodge would have caused some rumors, but he had forgotten how nosy the members of his clan could be. Though he admitted he was partly to blame for the information that was surely spread around. It was not common to see an heir of the Uchiha family parade himself out and about, especially with a woman at his side. There were not many foreigners or members outside the clan that stayed in the compound for more than a few hours, and surely that rebellious woman would have caused people to talk. If not for her features or physical attributes, then surely for her fierceness. It was not a common trait most people he knew were aware of. The few kunoichi he did know were not as emotive as her. Even though Naruto had mentioned that she was not technically a shinobi, it still nagged him to think a woman would know so much without actually employing her skills. It made him consider her dangerousness again, a feature past men probably had also dealt with. Thinking this caused a strange pang of jealousy to flit through him. Naruto was a hard woman to miss, surely some man would have tried to woo her by now. He had to go find her. With an annoyed glance at the dot that was now his brother, he disappeared with a surge of chakra. 00000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000 the road he was on, to which he quickly found out turned out to be a sort of bazaar. It was similar to the ones in Konoha in that it had merchants clustered together side by side, voices yelling and catching the attention of passerbys. As he neared, the salesman would vie for her attention among others and would proclaim to have the cheapest vases, to the softest quilts, the brightest gems, but none caught Naruto's eyes. Walking slowly past them, he would politely decline them and look forward to spotting a mirror of some type. He could hear the nine-tailed fox comment on his vanity, but Naruto felt he was justified to at least know how he looked. As time went on, he stopped looking as intently, and just admired some of the baubles that several of the merchants had. As if sensing her foreignness, a couple of them would be quite relentless and wouldn't stop with their haggling, surely overpricing whatever it was they were hoping to sell. Exhausted with yet another failed search, Naruto wasn't as polite and would simply walk by, not bothering to fake his interest or possible transaction. Just as he was about to turn around and resume the Madara search, he spotted a shining light in his peripheral vision. Almost laughing, Naruto made his way over to one of the last booths laid out. Well, I'll be damned, he said to himself, earning a few stares. Stopping in front of the booth, he admired the many varieties of mirrors and knickknacks that were laid out. There was a small sign mentioning something about a woman's special corner and gifts of some sort, but Naruto disregarded it and studied what this shop had to offer. There were jeweled combs, face powder sets, decorative jewelry boxes, brushes, and mirrors, of course. Most of the reflective panes were intricately designed and adorned to high heaven, but he decided to pick up a relatively plain, medium-sized mirror. It had a thick black border that looked like veined marble but was probably something cheaper, yet had a comfortable weight that made it feel pricey. The oval of the mirror had just enough room to see his entire face so that he could finally analyze himself. Lifting it closer to himself, Naruto couldn't help but suck in his breath. "Oh," was all that he could mutter. Sure, he was suspecting a pleasant appearance framed by some unruly bangs, but not this. What met his eyes was a delicate face that ended in the very popular dainty chin. His, or more like her eyes, seemed huge on her face. Whether it was from surprise or the actual feature he wasn't quite sure, but they were striking. Their color only added to their appeal, for they were a bright blue, richer, more concentrated in color than the ones he was used to seeing. Her nose was a cute dot on her face which almost contrasted with the full, plump and pink lips that finished the face. It gave the cute face a very sexy appeal. Kissable was the term that popped up in his head. For some reason a slight flush started to form across her face, and Naruto had to correlate this blushing woman to himself. It made his vision spin and caused him to give a couple deep breaths. "I'm beautiful," Naruto thought unabashedly and blinked rapidly, burning the image into his mind. "This is me now." Moving the mirror closer to his features, he noticed something he had not spotted earlier. There were very faint, very thin lines that ran on each side of his cheeks. "My scars," he thought with joy. At least that stayed with him. It was oddly comforting to find a feature that connected him to his original body, if not for the color of hair or eyes, at least would to ground him. The scars weren't as noticeable as with his male body, but the fact of the matter was that they were still there. Hearing a male throat clearing, Naruto snapped his head up and eeped nervously. Blushing, he mumbled under his breath for the prize and laid down several coins which he had shamelessly stolen from several of the villagers. Praying that it would be enough, he looked at the man for confirmation. The man only smiled gently and took half of the coins that were set on the table. "If you'd like to spend the rest, we are having a sale on all jeweled combs," the merchant said happily. "Thank you, but this is all I'll need," Naruto said softly, still in a daze, then picked up the remaining coins and walked off to join the river of people. 00000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000 the person he had spent the better part of his day for. Madara had spotted her weaving in and out of the crowd, and had been tailing her for several minutes. For some reason he felt like observing her, if only for a while. Seeing her now, she seemed gentler, more vulnerable. It was hard to peg her as a deadly person. His observations also let him survey her backside, which was a very nice one to look at. Of course he did this with the stealth of a ninja. He was a man after all. To ignore her attributes would be moronic and ignorant. Or so Madara tried to convince himself. Realizing the rump in question had now moved from his vision, he snapped out his reverie and followed it to a less condensed part of the compound. Following his gaze up to the blonde hair, he noticed that Naruto was now speaking to someone, quite amiably. Deciding this was time as any to let her know of his presence, he slowly walked up to her and her companion. 0000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000. About time. He had expected him to walk up to him and give him some speech, or perhaps even an apology, but after waiting a few seconds, he simply stayed at a constant distance behind him. This perplexed Naruto but wrote it off as some creepy stalker thing it seemed most Uchiha were fond of. Hell, I'm gorgeous, he probably can't help himself. Naruto thought, half in jest, half serious. Deciding to play along, Naruto weaved in and out of the crowd of people, not having a destination in mind anymore. Looking around, the neighborhood seemed a little familiar to him. As if to answer him, a familiar face seemed to materialize from the hustle and bustle walking in the opposite directions. I hope this isn't a bad idea, Naruto thought with slight worry. Naoki-san! Naruto yelled, waving his hand for emphasis, hoping to catch his attention. Said man visibly flinched and dropped several scrolls on the ground which Naruto had not noticed before. Oops. Quickly rushing over, he bent to pick up what scrolls Naoki had not already gotten his hold on. Sorry, Naoki-san, I seem to only cause you trouble, Naruto said with an apologetic smile. Naoki only mumbled, blush apparent on his face. After gathering all the scrolls, they both got up and stared at each other awkwardly, Naoki more than anything. Naruto bit his lip to prevent him from laughing, and piled what scrolls he had on top of the pile now in Naoki's arms. Why so many scrolls? I didn't know you were a scholar, Naruto asked, hoping to finally figure out something about this boy that Madara had cut short last time. No. I am not, Naoki said, then cleared his throat several times and looked at her shyly. They are documents for the metal trade. My family deals with almost all metal work here, he said, voice slowly thinning out and becoming inaudible. Really? That's amazing. You must be quite an important person, Naoki-san, Naruto replied. So you are their main weapons supplier, huh? Could be good to know you, he thought, for surely the family in charge of all metalwork would be aware of why they needed so much metal. The manufacturing of swords, kunai, shuriken, and many more weapons were always a priority in any ninja village. You should show me or give me a tour of your facility, or maybe your shop. Madara-san seems to have forgotten our little arrangement, so it would only be suitable for you to replace him, he said cheekily, hoping to get a rise out of the young teenager. Oh. Well, I could never, ever, replace Madara-sama, but I surely can give you a teacher. That would be great, that is, since you want it, and it wouldn't be any trouble. Naoki stuttered, slowly shrinking into himself, his gracelessness with women ever more evident. Awesome! Naruto chirped and patted him on the arm, hoping to reassure him, which only caused Naoki to jump slightly, and snap his head up in surprise. Madara-sama, Naoki said with renewed excitement and bowed clumsily, knocking down a few of the scrolls once again. Naoki-san, Madara replied, simply nodding in return. Seeing that no one was picking up the scrolls, Naruto bent down and picked them up, once again stacking him on the perilous pile of what was left. Looking at Madara, he only saw a hint of annoyance. He wasn't sure why, but Naruto had to reason it for his tardiness. Madara-san, what an honor to finally see you. If I didn't know any better, I would say you ditched me purposely and left me to wander by myself. If it wasn't for Naoki-san here, I would have run around the compound clueless, Naruto said mirthfully, hoping to put the Uchiha in the guilty spot. Madara only lifted his chin arrogantly. If I'm not mistaken, you were not there as previously mentioned. Naruto's eyes twitched in indignation, but what was previously mentioned? There was no specific time decided. Sensing the tense atmosphere, Naoki excused himself, then walked away as fast as he could without jostling the scrolls. Wait, Naoki, our tour! Naruto yelled after him. I was actually looking forward to it, he thought with a pout. He has matters to attend to, was all Madara said, when Naruto gave him an accusatory look. Yes, you also had matters to attend to, which evidently do not include me. Please, Madara-san, if you do not wish to discuss our future involvement with each other, I would rather hear it now than later. The more time I spend here, the less I have to explore the countryside, I'll remind you, he replied shortly, not exactly meaning it but anticipating a reaction all the same. Madara's head cocked back, clearly stunned. Of course I would like to, but as I mentioned earlier, I am a possible heir and I have many priorities. Okay, well then, how about now? No excuses? Let's spar to lessen that frigid demeanor of yours. Follow me. Fine. 00000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000 with exhaustion. One was a dark-haired man, while the other a bright-eyed woman who was right next to him. Both had bruises and cuts littering their bodies. They were lying in a slightly wooded area, an area that was now full of small craters, smoking trees, and a faint burning smell in the air. "Showed you," Naruto said between gasps of air, emphasizing this by getting up slowly and aiming a weak punch to his ribs. Madara only chuckled, then groaned due to all the bruising, and got up as well, giving her a considering look. "You have not even seen half of what I can do." The last barely a whisper. "Lucky I didn't use any jutsu," Madara finished, a cocky grin on his face. Naruto whipped his head back and laughed. Laughed so hard that his stomach hurt, which had nothing to do with the sparring, and had tears leaking down his face, leaving a trail of clean skin with all the dirt that was now patched on his face. Soon after, Madara joined him, and they both enjoyed their tittering. Naruto didn't want to admit, but that had been one of the most satisfying fights he had experienced. His partner was someone new who didn't know his moves, had different skills, and all this challenged him. It was great. Sure, they hadn't used any jutsu, Madara claiming it would not be fair for Naruto, thinking he didn't know any, but it was entertaining nonetheless. It had been an orchestra of flying kunai, exploding tags, and well-placed punches. Coming down from his hysterics, Naruto got up and stretched as much as he could. Looking down at the Uchiha, he offered him a hand. Knowing full well he could get up by himself, Madara took it anyway, accepting his peace offering. He could feel the bond between them tightening, just as any bond usually did after a fight, but this started to feel almost genuine. It almost made Naruto feel a little guilt for deceiving him. It's not like I chose to be like this anyway. He chided the universe. Noticing Madara had still not let go of his hand, he looked down at their intertwined grasps. Sensing his gaze, Madara cleared his throat and released his hold on him, but not before slightly tightening his grip. Grinning lightly, he gave Madara a teasing punch which he easily avoided. "You know, that was pretty fun," he said, not caring for his slang. Madara nodded in return. "I think you might have broken my ankle though." Concerned, Madara looked down, an apology forming on his lips. Biting his bottom lip, Naruto raised said injured ankle and lightly smacked Madara on the nose. "Ha! Gotcha!" Madara quickly grabbed his descending ankle and gave it a quick twist, making Naruto land on his behind. "Touché," Naruto said with a laugh and used the ankle Madara still grasped and hooked it as best as he could with his other leg and flipped Madara on his back. A groan escaped both him and Madara as their bodies complained about the abuse. "Okay, enough. Let's stop." Naruto gave in as he saw the look Madara was giving him, one of more pain to come. This caused another smile to grace his opponent's face, which reminded him how good-looking Madara could be. "If only we had your handy hot springs around, it would feel great right about now," he commented as they both got up and dusted themselves off as much as possible. Madara went still, a strange gaze met his eyes. "We could," he said, followed by a few seconds of silence, and then elaborated. "There is a large spring our compound is quite proud of. If you have no problem with it, we could head there now." Naruto was surprised. It was pretty late now that he realized it, and he assumed all the business closed around this time. "I would think all forms of business would be closed by now." "Naruto-san, the Uchiha run this compound. It would be no hard task to open the establishment up and simply use it," Madara said, a condescending tone in his voice. He could only stare. "Wow, that's actually really nice of him." Naruto grinned, in spite of himself, and walked up to him and looked around theatrically. "You know what would be even more fun?" Madara only cocked his head and gave her a questioning face. Leaning in close to his ear, Naruto whispered, "To sneak in." Then stepped back and waited to hear his response. After a long pause, Madara's arrogant facade slowly showed through, accentuated by the matching grin Naruto's face now had. "I do hope your stealth skills are up to it." Then, without another moment to spare, they both became blurs as they headed towards the spring. 10 minutes later, Madara and Naruto were crouched on a tree, overlooking the hot springs before them. It was on the outer edges of the town, so being spotted was not very likely. The only problem Naruto could see from up here was jumping over the wooden fence and landing quietly on the roof, which had a few open ventilation ports. A guard had been stationed close to the springs, but he was currently occupied by a very chatty female. "Why a guard?" Naruto asked. He couldn't imagine a sentry for something like a hot springs. "The hot springs are popular among troublemakers of the merchant families. They occasionally try to hop the fence for a free and potentially vandalizing experience," Madara said, matter of fact, almost bored. "Well, I'm not merchant's daughter," Naruto replied jokingly, and without giving Madara a clue, jumped down from the tree and sidled against the side of the building, observing the guard flirt with what he now saw was a middle-aged woman. Pretty, but with a mean-looking mole on her forehead that sort of ruined her whole appeal. Not that Naruto minded, but he noticed most people didn't dig the whole hairy mole look. A soft thump beside him was all he needed to know that Madara had also landed. As if by an unspoken challenge, Madara looked up at the wooden border, seemed to find a suitable spot and jump, silently landing on the roof. Not looking down to see if Naruto followed, Madara walked off, body disappearing. "Jerk," Naruto whispered, then with a quick look to make sure the guard was still occupied, sprung and landed on the roof. Only to land on a loose nail. "HMPM. Naruto yelled through his hand, which muffled the sound. Not as much as he'd like when he heard the guard say, "Someone there?" After a few stiff moments, the woman once again distracted the guard and Naruto let out a relieved sigh. Finding one of the slots lifted, Naruto walked over and looked down, it seemed to be a changing room. Hopping down lightly, making sure not to land on his bruised foot, Naruto checked out the room. It was the room in which you could leave your belongings and grab a towel. According to the sign above one of the sliding doors, it seemed to be the male changing room. Madara's cloths lay in a bunch in one of the cubby holes. Not feeling uncomfortable in the slightest, Naruto stripped himself of the dirty kimono and grabbed the nearest towel. Naked except for the cloth, Naruto slid open another door and walked into the open space of the actual springs. It was impressive. It was large, clearly meant for a bigger village. 50 people could fit in it without having to be disturbed by another group. There were rock formations that accented its appeal. Some were smaller and more decorative, while others were large and formed in semicircles for privacy. Heading towards one of these semicircles, Naruto stepped into the water. Naruto sighed with contentment. The hot water put him instantly at ease. Not caring where Madara had gone off to, he waded towards one of the rock formations. Before he got there, though, a light splash could be heard farther back. "Madara-san?" He whispered into the direction of the noise. No answer. Exasperated, Naruto rubbed his forehead. "I'm going to take a seat now," he said as quietly as possible. Wouldn't do good to be caught now that they were inside. Heading back towards the rock formation, Naruto waded in and found that the semicircle of stones had flat stacked piles of other stones that represented benches of sorts. "Cool," he said to no one and proceeded to sit on the center one, seeing as how there were 3 of them. Sitting down caused most of his body to be covered except his head and shoulders. Being engulfed by all the heat made Naruto hum happily. He could practically feel his skin becoming softer and his body thanking him. Letting his arms float out, Naruto closed his eyes and relaxed thoroughly. A few minutes later he could hear the water parting for what he assumed was Madara. Not caring in the least for his state of undress, Naruto didn't bother to open his eyes. Seconds later he could feel him sit down on the same bench as him. Naruto hummed, "Feels good." Waiting for an answering reply, he was met only by his breathing. "Eh?" Opening his eyes he saw that yes, Madara was seated next to him, but he wasn't looking at Naruto. Straightening up to have a better range of vision, he leaned forward and stared at Madara. "Something the matter?" Madara only let his back touch the stone, head tilted back looking at the ceiling. A little weirded out by this change in character, Naruto scooted closer to Madara and touched his shoulder. Madara did not even flinch slightly and wiped the bangs out of his eyes, but other than that didn't do much. Observing him closely, Naruto stood up on his knees and looked down from his heightened position. There was an unfocused look to Madara's eyes, almost as if in a dreamlike state. Wanting to snap him out, he did the least harmful thing he could do and flicked his nose. His touch caused Madara's eyes to snap back into focus and causes his body to spring upright. Unfortunately for Naruto, because he had been looking down over him, this sudden movement caused him to become unbalanced and fall into the water. Coming up sputtering and choking, Naruto glared at the man before him. "That wasn't too kind," he said, wiping the hot water from his eyes. "My apologies, I didn't," Madara whispered silently, then said nothing altogether. His mouth had dropped open, eyes wide, a blush quickly forming on his already red cheeks. "What?" "Yeah, I get it, you didn't mend it," Naruto finished for him, eyes now clear and water-free. "What's wrong with him?" Naruto thought to himself, then felt a slightly different temperature on his upper half. Looking down he noticed that the towel had slipped during his careless fall. It wasn't much per se, but the wet towel had ridden low enough that the pink of his areola was slightly poking up from beneath the body-hugging towel. He also noticed that his headlights were on, for whatever reason he didn't know. Somewhat embarrassed but not by much, Naruto pulled the towel up and crossed his arms, covering the show. "See what your clumsiness did?" he said, trying not to let the blush appear on his face. Madara had been slowly breathing heavier, and his voice snapped him out of his ogling. With an actual head bow he apologized again. Naruto assumed the head bow was more to compose himself than to show actual remorse, but he'd take it anyway. Waiting up to be right in front of the blushing young man, Naruto tilted Madara's chin up and looked at the evading eyes. "For a ladies' man such as yourself, you seem to be quite the innocent." This made his eyes harden slightly in defense, then he jerked his head away. "To be candid, I am not used to the unforgiving display you made. Also, the way you disregard my presence, which is very male, is extremely perplexing." Naruto could only laugh at his expense. "Because I'm not some blushing idiot," he becomes uncomfortable. "How very cavalier." Smirking down at the youth, Naruto cocked his head. "Well then, do you wish for me to sigh at your body?" he said, then blinked his eyes flirtatiously. "Ogle at your strength." Naruto made his hands spider walk tantalizingly up his chest, "and swoon at your regality?" Then did just that and gave a very feminine soft moan and landed on his chest, head turned to the side. "Why you doing?" was all Madara could muster, and his body tensed up tight, muscled corded up something fierce. Holding his laugh, Naruto looked up at the sputtering young man, eyes wide and alluring, then intentionally pressed his closer to his chest. I'm sorry, but isn't this what you wanted me to do? Madara groaned huskily, then jumped up, body turned away from him and ran out of the springs. Then grabbed his dirty clothes, jumped into the slot above, and was gone in the wink of an eye. Naruto saw all this happen within seconds and was silently impressed by his speed. Leaning back against the rock wall, Naruto giggled joyously. Oh my goodness. He actually got turned on. He struggled to say between giggles, sides beginning to hurt. He tried to settle down, but every time he did, the image of a turned on Uchiha, an obvious male bulge, and a sprint to the exit made him laugh all the harder. As if by karma, he heard the guard from earlier shout out into the springs. Hey! No guests allowed after 8 p.m. Do not move from your location. The circle of rocks gave him a little coverage, but if the guard came any closer, he'd get a real good look at his face. Shit! He yelled, looking up. He noticed that there was another open slot right above him. There was a risk of losing the towel and flashing the guard though. Fuck it! Making sure it was wrapped as tight as it could go, Naruto gave a chakra-infused jump and slipped through the slot perfectly, towel still intact. Score! He yelled cheerfully and headed to his temporary home, not really caring that he had left his clothing behind. They would disappear once he got to a certain distance anyway. Grinning to himself, he roof-hopped until he got to his tree home. This has to be the greatest night so far, he said happily and climbed up. After a few moments of catching his breath, he changed into a simple black shirt and short combo, nothing special. Then with one last indulging chuckle, he fell asleep. Naruto bit his lower lip, worried about his current dilemma. He had once again woken to the sight of leaves and a view of the Uchiha compound, but with no sight of a bed, or a window, or a decent roof. He was going on almost a full week at this tree. He seriously needed to find a proper place to lay at night. Shaking off the dirt and rubble that had gathered on him overnight, he set his mind on finding a modest room. If he had to extort someone for it, then so be it. He was a ninja after all. Naruto wasn't too picky though. Whether a shack or an abandoned warehouse, he didn't care, as long as he had a roof over his head. I ain't digging the whole bird toilet thing though, he thought, noticing the trademark gatherings of white fecal matter around his bed. Deciding that his current state was not befitting a young woman, Naruto morphed into a presentable outfit. Ditching the bright colors from yesterday, he went for a more muted, beige-colored kimono. This time he would try his best to assimilate successfully. After a brief encounter with a stubborn tangle of hair, he deemed himself presentable, using the hand mirror he had bought yesterday, and jumped down from his branch, ready to wander the streets. After a few minutes of aimless wanderings and half-hearted window shopping, Naruto finally reached a possible trail. He stumbled into a conversation between a few elderly members. He had heard them mention council meetings and something concerning the changing of political times. Piquing his interest, Naruto meandered over and gently asked if the council had finished their meetings yet, which to Naruto's dismay ended up in a negative answer. No, I believe the council meets till midday, replied a withered old man offhandedly. Let down, but with some hope intact, Naruto thanked the group and edged out of the cluster, joining the bustling crowd of people. Midday? It's still early, no later than 10, yelled Naruto in exasperation. To think that he would have to wait around for that fool just so he could find a decent place to sleep was ludicrous, not to mention he had yet to give him a tour of the inner compound. Well, I could say I'm honored that he offered, thought Naruto wryly to himself. Rarely did a ninja clan show the inner workings of a compound to an outsider, especially one that they knew little to nothing about. It spoke volumes of what Madara thought of him, and what he expected the other Uchiha members to think as well. Subconsciously though, Naruto knew it was only so Madara could show off his clan and impressive power. But it's also pretty smart of him, Naruto said softly to himself. If the inner compound meets me, even if it's a few members, then they know my face, my story, and the potentiality of my endangerment to them. Also, gives them an easier access to restrain me if needed. Not that they would need to, Naruto was going to try to be on his best behavior well as much as he got away with anyway. Nevertheless, Naruto had to still be cautious of this mini-village. It was essentially a glorified ninja camp, and it was full of shinobi with deadly skills and mindsets. With an exasperated sigh, he parted from the busier side of the main road, and headed off into a side street. If he had overheard correctly, one of the elderly women had mentioned that the council met in a long edifice with a distinctive door on this side of town. Whatever the door was, he knew not, but he figured he could spot it if it was so distinct. Keeping his eyes sharp, he slowly walked through the long street into which he had picked. It was mostly lined with residential houses and a few small businesses advertising accounting services and home repairs. He guessed it was the side of the compound with less than glamorous dealing, though it didn't stop him from subtly examining every detail of these storefronts. Perhaps the council used one of these stores as a facade for their actual meeting place. It was a bit paranoid of him to think this way, But it didn't hurt for him to be cautious, he was after all trained in spotting these kind of setups. Reaching out his hand, he laid his fingertips on the wooden structures as he slowly walked past. A trick he had learned from Jiraiya was that some secret hideouts had a distinctive seal, that though they were invisible to the naked eye, they couldn't help but give off a small pulse of chakra. Advancing forward, he zoned out any disturbances and concentrated on feeling a significant power source, or anything out of place. Nope. Nothing. Ow, sharp edge. Normal. Normal. Didn't need to see that. Okay, zilch. Naruto thought with exasperation. He had walked by at least 12 buildings and he had yet to see anything interesting. Excluding the half-dressed man in a wig, whatever that was all about, he didn't know, but nothing had caught his eye. Nearing the last 2 houses, he tried to stay positive. Perhaps they felt like going with the cliché and be the last house on the right? As he continued to drag his fingertips along the storefronts, he slowed down and stopped in front of the last building. Looking up, he couldn't help but smile tightly. Fuck. He mentally cursed, because what laid in front of him was nothing but a rundown antique store. No chakra pulse, no suspicious activity, no interesting door, just a lame and dilapidated building. Gah, can I ever catch a break? He yelled at the edifice, pounding on the rotted window frame. The building gave a slight cough of dust, but nothing else. Turning around, Naruto decided to continue his search in the next street. I'm gonna start hating this place. He retraced his steps and made it halfway before he heard a slight rustling. Whipping around, he stared suspiciously at one of the alleyways that he had just passed. Activate badass mode? Naruto thought, half serious, half jokingly. Whoever it was had to be a civilian. No trained shinobi would be so loud in his stockings. Naruto got as close to the wall to the edifice as he could, and took unhurried steps, slowly nearing the bend to the alley. Stopping right at the corner, he listened again, hoping to catch a sound of whoever was near. Nothing. Tricky little bastard. Just as he was about to turn the corner, a tall figure shuffled right into the main street, and if Naruto had not heard it at the last second, would have knocked him on his feet. Naruto quickly jumped back and smiled. He was not expecting this. Relaxing his body, he cocked his head to the side curiously. Naoki-san! What a pleasant surprise! Naruto cheekily announced. He couldn't help but exhale with amusement. Naoki looked just as the day he had met him, tall, unruly hair covering his eyes, and like last time, with scrolls bundled up in his hands. Was he following me? He then thought, suspicion overruling his amusement. Naoki stuttered out a quick greeting, shuffling the scrolls in his hand nervously. Gee, good morning, Naruto-san. He all but meeped. Lord, give me strength. Naruto thought with slight annoyance. Sure, it was endearing in some ways, but this young man reminded him too much of a young Hinata, and it took way too many years to count for her to finally relax around him. Shaking his head of nostalgic musings, he bowed slightly to Naoki and readied his questions. He didn't already want to start suspecting people, but it was never harmful to make sure. How are you this fine morning? I don't mean to pry, but did you have any business around here? I did not know there was much to do in alleyways. Naruto said pleasantly, but with a hint of suspicion. The young man could only flush, guilt covering what features Naruto could see. Aha. You must forgive me, Naruto-san. For USC, it was mere coincidence that I saw. That I happened to see you. I did not know what I could do. Well, could not react. At least be properly. I mean that, as Naoki whispered, hunching into himself and backing into the alley again, then bumping into the corner of what resembled a trash can. A loud crash was heard as Naoki yelped loudly and jumped out of the way of falling garbage. Naruto watched all this happen and grinned. How could he suspect such a flustered adolescent? How awkward can one guy be, though? Grinning, he turned the corner into the alley and saw the disorder that Naoki had caused and sighed. Naoki, it was simply light banter. Don't fret over my question, I really was surprised. He said as he lightly scooted the garbage to the side and patted Naoki's arm, a silent apology in his eyes. Looking up from his hunched position, glittering green eyes regarded her with obvious guard. After a few seconds, Naoki relaxed lightly, a shy smile forming on his face. Thank you, Naruto-san, he said with an almost reverent tone. Okaway. Naruto arched an eyebrow questioningly but let it go. What a strange boy. He reflected. If you don't mind, Naoki-san, may I ask where you are headed? I don't mean to be forward, but I am quite out of my element and am in need of some friendly company. Blushing brightly, Naoki nodded furiously. Oh, of course. I mean to say, I am on my way to a council meeting, but of course you may accompany me there. I don't believe it would be any problem. I hope. Bingo. Damn, I am one lucky son of a bitch. Naruto internally cried out with glee. Someone up there was surely looking out for him. Get on with it. I do not comprehend how you waste time celebrating when it might not even be the council you are looking for. QB butted in negatively, a deep rumbling coursing through Naruto's mind. Really, you shouldn't be such a downer. I can hope, and if not, I can just keep looking, you're just restless is all. Which, by the way, is making you pretty much unfucking bearable. Naruto thought snidely. Would you not be as well if you were in my position? Also, do not wave off the fact you have yet to use any of our major chakra. Your mind and body stink with staleness. It is not good for either of us. QB fired back. Naruto stilled. Of course. He almost forgot. Through his ordeal, he had yet to use any amount of jutsu that required a large portion of his chakra reserve. Both QB and him had learned that throughout the process of regularly expelling chakra, a stronger connection formed between them. Otherwise, their combined chakras tended to weigh them down, making it hard to communicate. It was almost like letting a house build dust and having to breath it in every day, and large jutsus were the equivalent of cleaning it out once in a while. This problem was not extremely impeding, it was only slightly uncomfortable, which the Nine Tails hated to be. The little pansy. Naruto mocked. Naruto the demon warned. Okay, my bad, let's just hope this place is it. Coming back to the outside world, he smiled at Naoki, who had been patiently awaiting his response. With a happy bounce, he motioned for Naoki, lead the way. He chirped, and followed with hopefulness as Naoki shuffled away towards the main roads. Naruto followed Naoki as he quickly blabbed about what the meeting would entail and apologized for any dullness. Naruto simply waved it off and nodded when he needed to and made himself look like he was intent on the subject. I would need one small favor though. Naruto caught Naoki saying, with the most serious tone Naruto had heard from him yet. Hiding his surprise, Naruto agreed quickly and listened to his proposition. After a few quick lines from Naoki, Naruto once again had to hold himself back from giggling. No, Naoki-san, it is you who is doing me the favor. Let this here be the last time we hear of this situation. The children do not require an extra estate for recreation. Funding must be allocated to the supplement of weapons to actives, at least for the time being. Boomed the powerful voice of Ryota. A few voices disagreed, but with a stern look, the room quieted and grudgingly settled. Though not always proper, Ryota knew how to end a topic when needed. Failing to hide a prideful grin, Ryota picked up a scroll from a dwindling pile to his left and began another topic. Next on the agenda is regarding the previously mentioned allocation of weapons, specifically the metal supplier. As of these past few months, we have commissioned Naoki-san, from Division 2, Sector 7. As stated on the report, he has successfully raised the shipment amount 60%, and increasing every week. Metal quality is surprisingly high while production costs are low. We have Naoki scheduled to speak more in depth. He shall also relay the message from the Foreign Affairs section he has recently been working alongside with Madara-sama. With a nod, Ryota motioned to one of the council assistants behind him. Said assistant quickly left the room to fetch Naoki. The council waited silently, readjusting robes, and softly continuing subjects on unrelated topics. After a few moments, a knock was heard at the door, causing the room to still. Enter, replied Ryota. In shuffled Naoki with the bundle of scrolls in his hands. One to which he gave to Ryota, and the others to which he distributed among the council members. With a deep breath, the shy Naoki transformed before the council's eyes, straightening out and dispelling the shy and timid look about him. Now was a businessman with a goal in mind and with a confidence that graced those knowledgeable in their field. Slowly but surely, important information began to spill out of the adolescent's mouth, causing the council to jot down notes and begin the process of discussion. Naruto sat outside the door of what he assumed was the council meeting room, mentally counting the minutes he had been sitting outside, on what had to be the world's most uncomfortable bench. My ass hurts. Naruto whined internally, and stood up slowly, stretching into an almost painful arch. He looked around and smirked, remembering as to how they had merely walked into this place. Once the council building had entered their sights, he knew why the elderly woman had specifically mentioned the door. It was a wide, rounded red door with 3 black decals painted on it. The door was so big that 4 men could walk through it, shoulder to shoulder. It was almost amusingly big. He was pretty sure no man could grow up to be that size, not even in a kimchi. What really made him want to laugh was the fact that the red door had an uncanny resemblance to the Sharingan. Subtle and humble, the council is not. Coming back to his present self, he observed the mostly blank area around him. Besides the closed door to his left, there was not much to see. It was a stark white building with doors spaced widely from each other, indicating large rooms. He could only see to his left, for his right was the entrance to the edifice. It reminded him of a hotel, but without the fancy trimmings and the always present lazy concierge. Now that he thought about, there was no one he could visibly see. No one had asked for his identification, No one had questioned him or Naoki, not a single soul roamed this desolate-seeming building. All that had transpired when they entered was a subtle chakra pulse that had vibrated throughout the building. Other than that, nothing. Pretty neat. Naruto mused. No guards, no seals, just a chakra indication system. So economical. So simple. Ruffling his bangs out of the way, Naruto crossed his hands behind his head and pouted. Frankly, he was bored out of his mind. He had been sitting there for almost half an hour now, with nothing to entertain him or keep him occupied. Naoki did warn of the dullness of the situation, yet he didn't expect it to drag on for so long. Sighing in exasperation, he continued to stretch, hearing his joints cracking with satisfaction. Well, I guess it wouldn't hurt to explore this place just a little. He whispered mischievously to no one in particular. Heading to one of the hallways, he decided to find out at least something about this place. Nearing the closest wooden door, he stopped and analyzed what he could of it. Which wasn't much, it was a solid wooden door, with an ordinary doorknob. Other than that nothing stood out. Wait, Naruto stopped, there's no room number. He scratched the back of his head. How in the world did they know where to meet? It must have something to do with that chakra signature system. Sneaky? Testing the doorknob, it was predictably locked. Naruto did this for another few minutes before becoming bored once again and returning to his original spot. Hurry up, Naoki. I ain't got all damn day. Naruto thought with irritation, but then paused. Wait, I guess I technically do. As if answering his pleas, a few seconds later, the door next to him creaked open. A man twice his age motioned for him to follow him. Smiling politely, Naruto stood up and followed. Finally! Entering the doorway, he was surprised to see another door, directly in front of the door he had walked through. His guide looked back, and stared at Naruto. After a few moments he spoke harshly, speak only when spoken to. Do not ask unnecessary questions. Do not make any sudden movement. He said quickly, pausing for an affirmative sign from Naruto. Something must have shown on his face, because the man said more gently, and do not be afraid, they are good men. Naruto smiled politely and nodded. The man turned around once again and quickly knocked on the door in a succession of short, calculated raps. A few seconds passed before some unheard indication caused the man to open the door. Naruto couldn't help but feel slightly nervous. It was exciting to be only a few steps away of a room full of such influential men, even if they were Uchiha. He wondered if they would reject the idea of having a woman here. But what do I know? Maybe there are plenty of women involved in crucial, high-stakes political matters. Naruto thought sarcastically. If the Uchiha men of this time were any similar to how Madara had acted, or to the Uchiha that he had been involved with in his timeline, then he might have a slight problem on his hands. Taking a deep breath, he followed the guide and stepped out and next to him, then began to observe the setup before him. The room was a long and rounded area. The walls were white and mostly plain, mimicking the layout of the hallways, and were lined with lights that encircled the space. A huge table, which was round as well, was in the middle of the room, with about 12 men sitting at it. Each man looked at her inquisitively, some more obvious than the next, but all curious. Even a man who was uncharacteristically dark compared to the rest, and seemed to reign over this particular meeting, appeared caught off guard, his eyebrows nearly reaching his hairline. Scanning the rest of the group and memorizing them quickly, he picked out a familiar-looking one. It was none other than Madara himself, trying somewhat successfully to hide a shocked look from his face. Inwardly smiling, Naruto couldn't help but gloat. Found ya! His internal boasting was cut short when a nervous cough caused Naruto to look behind him. It was Naoki, a serious look on his face, which caused Naruto to cock an eyebrow. Sensing the importance of resuming the meeting, he walked over to Naoki and stood next to him, hands clasped in front of him, and a smile placed on his face. Waiting for what he hoped was Naoki's introduction, he simply stood there, trying not to look suspicious. And this here is my recently appointed assistant. I would like you to meet Naruto-san. She is an extremely capable young woman with experience in the field of foreign affairs and business negotiations. Naoki said, without a hitch in his voice, or any indication that what he was saying was total bullshit. Naruto stepped forward slightly and bowed. It is an honor to meet you all, then gave an honest smile and stepped back next to Naoki. What accompanied next was a whole mess of political jabber that Naruto really didn't feel like remembering. What mostly transpired was him trying to look professional and competent, while Naoki continued some presentation he had already started, as well as answering the questions which the men addressed about her. Chiefly about how they had come to meet and things like that. Naoki cleverly mentioned how they hadn't known each other for long, but sensing her expertise, they had paired up in an effort to optimize each other's business. Naruto nodded when appropriate, and returned simple answers as to how old she was and how long she had been involved with these type of affairs. Other than that, Naoki directed the conversation and the flow of the meeting, coming back to mention numbers and strategies which flew over Naruto's head. He had to admit that seeing this side of Naoki was interesting to say the least. He saw an experienced businessman, suited for this type of thing. If I didn't know he was lying, I wouldn't doubt him for a second. He reflected, zoning in out of the conversation, all the while giving the room his attention. Naruto didn't miss the fact that Madara barely uttered more than 3 words, or the way a man seated across from said Uchina was constantly giving him amused glances. After some bouncing back between the council and Naoki, and at one point, Naruto, they were promptly dismissed and escorted out. Naoki and Naruto walked out of the building in a tense silence, none bothering to start the conversation. Both walked aimlessly for a few minutes, leaving the less than populated area they had been in to join the now busy center of the compound. After passing a few yelling merchants and giggling children, Naruto couldn't take it anymore and cracked. "Goodness, how can you be so silent, Naoki-san? That was quite an ordeal. Did you see Madara-san's face? If I could capture that image for the rest of my life, I do not believe I could be more amused," he exclaimed, looking at Naoki with glee. Naoki only smiled softly, a furious blush adorning his face. "I will admit, it was amusing. But I see and not say I do not feel guilty. I hope Madara-sama is not too mad. What possessed me to do that, I am unsure." He trailed off, voice thick with guilt. You worry too much, Naoki-san. Friends forgive each other easily. Let me treat you to lunch. It is the least I can do for that huge favor you just paid me," Naruto said happily, reaching out and laying his hand on Naoki's wrist. Naoki only looked at said wrist as if it was a foreign object, and the blush that had just drained from his face returned with a vengeance. Aye. Sighing with exasperation, and knowing well that Naoki would just stand there if he didn't do anything, Naruto grabbed his wrist and headed for the nearest eating establishment, a flabbergasted Naoki in tow.